Welcome to the dumbest automotive podcast in all of YouTube. Been rehearsing that from the seated position,
Well done.
We still don't have a name.
Nope.
I'm trying that one out to see if, the Hoovy-cast or the Hoopty-cast works because Car Simps was resoundingly hated. So welcome, everyone. Today we're talking about the history of Pontiac. Every week, these gentlemen right here, Elvis and Rob Santori, which I didn't introduce last week for whatever reason, they tell me a story, and I am entertained by them, and hopefully you are too. And that is the weekly thing. It's a different story. It's Elliot's turn this week, and it's the history of Pontiac,
Yes.
which is a very storied, long history, 100 years, and then just killed off very unceremoniously in the Great Recession, and everybody misses it. Of all the brands, I feel like that's one where they say, bring back, it's Pontiac.
It's my most missed brand for sure.
Yes.
That's why I was like, I got to do a story on this.
What would you like to bring back from your past exploits?
My exploits or
Yeah.
my
Cars
car
here?
exploits?
I don't know.
This isn't
in your,
cars.
in
Yeah,
your
all right.
Like,
disastrous relationship history.
Yeah, how's this going?
I really liked Pontiac GTOs for those 3 years. They were really cool.
Okay. Rob?
Pontiac?
I was just saying something personally.
Oh, what would I-
it could be hair. It could be
No,
any.
I'd like to bring my hair back. That's a really good Lord. I hope one of your chins grows back.
He'll cool sculpt it right off. He'll
I
cool
had to
sculpt
do
it right
smart
off.
lipo for that to get it to go away because there's a skinny guy with a double chin. It was weird, but
No,
yes.
yeah, hair would be top of the list for sure
Yeah.
for me. But
Also, no Hawaiian shirt this week.
no, they don't like the Hawaiian shirts.
Oh,
They're not a
geez.
fan.
Rob is at mercy to the commenters.
No, I'm not. That's fine.
I guess I kind of am because
trust me.
I abandoned the shorts. So
Yes, that was one of the ideas for the podcast. What was the name?
Free Ball and Elliot.
Free Ball and Elliot podcast.
from Rob, one of our
the full
faithful.
spread with the Daisy Duke shorts that he likes to wear. Which, I mean, when he's at a car show sitting next to a C4 Corvette, that is the view everyone gets as well. Elliot just didn't realize it until we started doing a podcast that is his lawn chair view. That
Exactly.
when people walk by to see the car at his car show.
A man that is exactly that camera tall is just has a straight view down the pipe.
The cameras are mounted up higher, as you can see. Like, well, they can't see, but the tripods are mounted a little bit higher. So,
And like I said, this one's just straight down the chute for me.
Yep.
So, hey,
Yeah,
no
and-
more.
No,
Look,
that-
now I have leg coverings.
Yeah, we're proud of that for sure.
well, and you can support Elliot's continuation to wear pants by going to our Patreon and joining there to support them and all the research they do for these. And Elliot has a 10-page outline, I guess.
Yes.
Pontiac,
Wow.
it does have a big history. And I was definitely a fan. Growing up, my parents both had 78 Trans Ams in high school. So they always talked about their first cars being the same. And Smokey and the Bandit was the VHS in the house that got watched all the time. So the Pontiac Trans Am was always a thing growing up with me. But as far as ownership, there's been quite a few. Nothing that old, though.
Right. And I think that's where my personal memories of Pontiac started when I was a kid. Like, my dad had them in the 90s, and then I guess the early 2000s. But they were just kind of always around. I mean, it's like we really spent a lot of time at the Pontiac dealership. I mean, like, I have memories going there. It's just something I feel like almost everybody around our age has some sort of interaction or tale with a Pontiac.
Yeah, I would say it's honestly one of the. I'm not really a big Pontiac guy, but without the Firebird, I don't know that I would be into cars.
Yeah. And we should get into that when we get to the
Yeah,
Firebird.
I've got a little story for that, which is
great.
interesting. That really got me hyped on Pontiac as a brand.
Before we launch in, do we want to do the what's new with you this week deal or just launch right in?
There's,
Is there anything new? Now you're
Nothing?
married and
Not much.
all-
I mean, I got the dueling Rolls Royces. That's been fun. The 68
those.
and the 2000. I need to decide which one I'm keeping. As
What a
far
tough
as
choice.
far as YouTube
So
and
the
stuff.
older one.
The older one doesn't have air conditioning. It's right-hand drive.
Yeah,
and
but
it's,
it's got
and
nostalgia.
have you been outside?
Well, right, but I mean, the fall's coming.
the thing is, I just discovered I was taking the license plate off to put on one of my dealer plates, and when they repainted it, they didn't even take the license plate off when they repainted it.
Oh,
Painted
no.
over it?
So he took the license plate off. There's the original paint behind the license plate.
Oh.
But that's how bad this respray was on this thing.
Well, I mean, it doesn't look great, but the car itself is cool.
The interior's
Really
nice,
cool.
mechanically all sorted out. And amazing how well that thing runs and drives, considering it was $4,500 sight unseen from California.
That is
Also,
so cheap.
When we checked it out after the podcast, those are the fastest windows I've ever seen
Yes.
Oh
on
my
any
God.
car. Those would chop your fingers off.
Oh my god, my kid would get her fingers lopped off
Just
in a minute.
insane.
They're amazingly fast.
Yeah, and Car Trek is out now fully, and that has been doing well thus far.
Awesome.
As of the time of this recording, the third one's not out, but 1 and 2 are doing great. Both have been on trending. So that's been cool to see the final
It's nice.
product.
It's back after 3 years and doing very well on VinWiki. Yes.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, channel change.
It's a relief. Like, oh, okay, because long break and then also switching channels. Because Freddie's content strategy has changed a lot in the last 3 years or so, and he wants to keep it focused on builds and that theme. And so, yes, to be on trending for the first 2 videos, we'll see how the third one does, and to see that we're on track for 1 million plus views on each of them. Whew, bigger, and of course people liking it. As far as us having to take a step back in budget and in production and all that stuff. Not having 10 cameras and all that stuff. There's a difference, and you can tell, but the essence is still there.
Right.
So
And I'm excited, like, since somebody who helps out with it. The better it does, the more likely another one comes along. So
you were a big help dragging that car back,
Yes.
the SLK with the van and all that stuff, and Jake as well.
Jake pulled
was
practically
camera
all
number
all-nighter.
3,
Yep.
and got a lot of shots, including I think the one where Freddie spins into frame in his Supra that got into the final cut. That was Jake in my tree line catching that one.
Really
nice.
So yeah, Jake got some key shots. In there.
I'm not a camera guy, and I got to work the camera a little bit during the dirt track portion, and that was fun because it would be like make sure the shot and then run and duck because so much dirt would come flying. It was nuts.
I'm just glad they're still going. Because
Yes, I know.
anybody who appreciates Top Gear appreciates these.
Yeah,
They're fun to watch. The format is just amazing. We love it. It's just so cool to see. And then, of course, the people that we know
Exactly.
that are in it. It's really, really neat to watch.
Yeah. So the 2 obstacles are, getting a sponsor for the next one, which Auto Tempest has been around for all of them. If it does well enough, they'll do some more. The other obstacle is Freddie. And I think by the time this podcast will come out, there'll be his next big project unveil, which is
Ooh.
It's a big one.
Ooh, I don't know what this is.
I do. It's an undertaking.
It is,
So-
well, they always are.
so when that video exists, you'll see, might not be doing a trek for a while as he's
Really?
dove into that one. But yeah.
I'm excited to watch for
How
that.
about you, Rob?
I'm good. My baseball season is officially over.
No more answering phone calls during video games.
No, we're done with that. Unfortunately.
What's
Eight-
your season
record?
win-losses? Yes.
8-9. Which is not bad. There were teams that were 2-14 or 3-13.
If you were a professional coach in your first season, they'd let you come back for a second season to see if you turned it around.
Yes.
But then if you did that again, then you'd be fired.
I would be fired. But
Yeah.
I am coming back. I'm excited to coach them again. Most of the kids are 9, so they all want me to coach again. So I did something right.
Okay.
So, and we're going to try to do fall ball with some of the kids as well. So please donate to the Patreon because I want to pay for the kids to do fall ball. So
Yeah, these are like underprivileged youth. So I
Yes.
think it's worth saying. These are not.
It's League 42 is nonprofit. They basically donate all the bats and the jerseys and all of this so the kids can play. So it's a really awesome thing that they do. And this is the first year I've been involved with it, and it was just such a joy with these kids. It was amazing. So
That's awesome.
I had a great time and excited to do it again, and can't wait to do it again. But other than that, I mean, no new cars other than one that I have to go pick up next weekend. But yeah, I know
We'll
that
see.
you called a. Well, I don't want to cuss, but you didn't like it.
Oh, I can't wait to see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fine.
Well, I do have an update thanks to the commenters on the title thing with the truck.
Yeah.
One of the guys said, it said like title, like salvage title issued or something.
Salvage history reported.
So basically, something happened that damaged, according to the commenter, something happened that damaged it beyond like where it would have been salvaged if you had tried to repair it from insurance or whatever. So whoever owned it probably just paid out of pocket to fix it, and therefore the title is still clean. You could technically have a car that's been cut in half and balled up against a tree, and as long as you pay for it to fix it all yourself, that title stays.
That's good to know.
Right. Well, and insurance will say if you're keeping the car, and then some of them, especially like when there's a hurricane or something crazy, and there's so many titles to process, they'll just completely miss doing the title. They're just like, okay, we're just giving you the check, and then they just completely blow it on the title work, even though it's supposed to be salvaged. So it makes sense.
Oh, and when I registered it, it was
fine.
clean. Yeah, perfectly fine. So I
there
that's
you go.
what.
Way better than the title washing and all this other stuff that I was like, oh man,
Yeah, that
you
we thought
really
it could
gotta.
be. I was worried about that. So I heard before we get into this, you had a suggestion for the name before we start.
Oh yeah, well, see, again, looking at the commenters, everyone's kind of back to liking car sims.
I know.
I know that's going to stir a bunch of people up into not liking it, but I think we just lean into
We
it. And
can't win with you people.
Not really.
we could just change it to car cucks,
Oh,
and that's worse.
Jesus,
Lord.
no.
So think about
No.
it. If you're upset about simps, Imagine.
No,
Car
it's
cucks?
one thing
And
to
there's
be
the
like
alliteration.
simpy to a person or a thing. It's another thing
no.
to sit in a chair and,
And
watch
your-
somebody else.
Watch you get screwed by your car, or watch somebody else get
No.
screwed by your
Let's
car.
not bring
No.
your relationships into this.
Anyway.
No, okay,
anyway,
no.
the history of Pontiac. What a segue.
I had a name. What about Jack Stands? But STANS. Is your stand for something? It's like
Oh.
being a simp, but Jack Stands.
Okay.
That's not bad.
Standing Jack.
All right, it's not jack
Standing
off
jacking is
stands.
what
It's
Jake
jack
said.
stand.
You're a
All right,
huge
all right,
fan of
Pontiac,
jacking.
Fine, it wasn't cucks. Go.
Hey, anyway, I'm just saying, could be worse, guys.
Truth.
Okay, so Pontiacs. It's interesting. You know, a lot of brands, if you ever to do like the history of Ford or whatever else, it kind of begins with a man and it goes on, you know, there's a lot of personal story. Pontiac started its life as like a companion brand. Like these other companies existed, and then they brought it into existence to fill in gaps.
So nobody bought it up as far as when General Motors was formed. Okay.
Right. It wasn't like somebody, you know, a startup company that got, you know, like it has a great beginnings with somebody, a father making things in his garage, and, you know, and then all of a sudden it gets acquired by GM. GM was like, we need to fill a gap between this and this. And believe it or not, it started out as a companion brand for a brand that way no longer exists anymore. It was a companion brand for a company called Oakland.
Okay.
So Oakland, let's see here. I forgot I do have this. It's not like this dude was building carriages. There's a whole history there. So that's what an Oakland 4, I believe, is. You know, like I said, Oakland was a real car company that did start making horseless carriages and was acquired by GM. So that does have its own story, but they don't last for very long because, you know, they were found. Oakland started in 1907. This was their logo. They were based in Pontiac, Michigan, which is kind of part of where the name comes from. But, you know, when William C. Durant founded GM, also in 1908, he originally founded it as a holding company for Buick because he had that, but he quickly started acquiring other companies. He acquired Oldsmobile and Cadillac. And so he acquired Oakland in 1909 as the new value brand. So it was kind of like, these other cars are pretty nice. We need something that's an everyman car, and Oakland was that. Now, of course, they acquired Chevrolet in 1917, so now that was the new value brand, and then Oakland was kind of in there. By the mid-1920s, there were gaps in the pricing structure and everything else, which is why these sub-brands began forming, because I think I have some prices here. Like, as Cadillacs were like $3,000 to $6,000 in 1929, which is quite a lot of money. Buicks about $1,000 to $2,000. Oaklands were then the next cheapest at $1,000 to $1,300, and then you had Oldsmobile a little under them, and so on and so forth.
Right. It was sort of a class system where,
Right.
yeah, now is the point in the 20s or the teens where most people could afford a car with the Model T.
Right.
But then, you know, showing what level of social class you were, you'd go in brands, which is definitely not the way nowadays, because there's people driving around, you know, big Chevy pickup trucks, and
And that's a status
they think
symbol now.
that's cool, you know. So it's very different from what we have today. So that's why they'd have so many brands,
Right.
which we don't have today necessarily with under one umbrella.
So yeah, exactly. Like, and that's what happened with Pontiac. 1926, Pontiac gets introduced as a sub brand for Oakland because those price gaps were too big, and each of the other ones got sub brands too, which are not around. You probably haven't heard of. Cadillac added LaSalle as their next step down. I have heard of those. I've seen those. That stuck around for a little bit. Oldsmobile started a sub brand called Viking, and Buick started Marquette. So
Just
each
so
of
you know,
those
just so everyone
slotted.
knows, Rob has his own set of notes just borrowing from Elliot. He's not like reading a book.
No, I'm not.
He's not like
I'm
getting
not
bored.
bored.
and just
I'm
like-
not bored yet. I'm good.
He's following along with his own
Yes.
notes. Okay.
And I'm not on my phone.
Yeah, I saw that.
once,
It
yes.
was, yeah.
Thanks.
So yeah, so that's where Pontiac's at. There were a few other sub brands. Obviously, none of those lasted. Pontiac. Let's see here. I don't know. I've given Jake just a mess of files.
That is not Joe Pontiac.
No,
Joe
that's what I'm saying. I was really disappointed that there wasn't going to be that. And the chief Ottawa chief that was named after had nothing to do with him.
What?
Yeah. So it's three different reasons they called it Pontiac. It was the founding place where Oakland started their coach building or carriage building stuff. It's located in Pontiac, Michigan, and there was an Indian chief for the Ottawa tribe who was very famous named Chief Pontiac. So that's the original logo. They stuck with the Indian motif, well, for quite a while. Their first car was called the Series 627. It was just a short wheelbase light six, which is an inline six, priced to sell at 4-cylinder prices. So again, if you think about the lineup, this was not, when we were growing up, Pontiacs were kind of seems pretty cheap. This was still mid-level, lower mid-level. The pricing of this would be about $745 to almost $900, where your Chevys were still $500. And remember, this is 29, so the price price difference is huge. You could buy a house for
So this was kind of Lexus compared to like.
Well, Lexus is
not
top
quite.
tier.
No.
Well, I guess
No.
top for Toyota. Yeah.
This is like, if you look at it, this is like if you look at a color chart where the colors slowly, there's a lot of fading going on here. It's not as distinct.
I feel
levels.
like Pontiac was always at the same sort of level that it always was until it became, more of a sporty, fun brand, I suppose. But it was always like seen as nicer than a Chevy and not as nice as a Cadillac. So
Right.
that seems to be
And that's where it
always
started.
lived. Yeah.
And like I said, I really did think that it had some sort of hometown founding, not purely business related. But as you can see here, and especially from those other brands, they stick around. So anyway, the Series 627, it's a 3.1 liter inline six with about 40 horsepower. Everything was making about that. That's what Model A's were making. It's just the way it was. But the difference was, marketing wise, it was way cooler to say you had got a strong inline six compared to the Model A's inline four. So it just, even if it was making about the same horsepower, it was still one of those
more
things
torque,
where
right?
you had, it's pretty torquey. And
Marketing had to be so tough back then because the cars looked so similar.
Oh yeah, you couldn't
Yeah.
tell them apart.
well, it was, it's something I've always loved about old cars until a certain age. It's like they didn't even think about it. They were like, the wheels have to go here. The radiator needs to be completely vertical and in front. And it's like every brand universally decided, we can't change these facts. They have to go there.
And all they would do is make the nose longer for the size of the engine
Right.
because they're all straight eight or straight 6, 4, 6, 8. And the noses, the beaks would just get longer.
Right.
And that was the only way to tell the difference in the status of, very long nosed
Yeah, they make fun of it in
26 Packard there or
They
something.
make fun of it in cartoons all the time. I mean, look at Cruella DeVille's car, like
Oh,
how
yeah,
long the front end of that thing
True.
is. It's a real thing. So anyway, they made this in a crap ton of different versions. I had to write them down because this was the age. If you had the frame, and then they just put different bodies on it, but you could get it in a sedan, 2-door or 4-door, a Landau coupe, a sport Phaeton, a sport Landau sedan, a sport cabriolet, or a sport roadster.
which is something that they don't do at all
Right.
today.
Oh, no.
But it was all essentially the same car. It was just like, is the top open all the time? Like a Phaeton's not going to have windows generally. Big 4-door convertible with a huge top. And then same thing with a cabriolet will have roll-up windows, but a Roadster won't. It's, they had different trims. Anyway, so it's a cheaper version of its Oakland 6. They sold 75,000 of them in the first year,
My
which
God.
for the time is pretty good. I mean, you're obviously not going to compete with Ford being a new brand and a sub-brand at that, but that was pretty good. Next year, they pretty much doubled it with 140,000 sales.
Wow.
And then the next year, 200,000 sales. So
Wow.
they started off like everyone very well received. So well received that it actually killed its kind of parent company. GM just was like, these are doing great. Let's just get rid of Oakland altogether. So it completely overtook Oakland by the end of 1931. That's just not even around anymore.
I don't know that I've ever seen an Oakland running around.
And I've even around all the classic cars I've been around, I don't think I've seen one.
So the big new brand, the quality must have been pretty good.
Yeah. Like I said,
And
well received.
Everybody's bored with Ford Model A's.
Everybody
They're
has one
very
of those.
long in the tooth at this point.
Yes.
So,
Well,
for,
the A wasn't. The T definitely was.
right. I mean, as
but yeah,
far
the A,
as
it's
far
just-
as the Fords being,
Yeah.
the thing that everybody buys.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, if you have any sort of, neighborhood curb appeal or any of the keeping up with the Joneses, every 5 of your next door neighbors are going to have Fords. You could be the only one with.
And this
you
is
know,
like
one of these.
$200 more than a Ford Model A.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So not like a Packard was $1,000 more. So,
Right.
So this would be the car that like we would want back then because we would want to be a little different. We wouldn't want the Ford that everybody else had.
And
We
having
want
6
something-
cylinders, you know?
something
It's like-
a little more torque, a little.
No, we would be buying used Packards and Duesenbergs
Yes.
and Rolls
Well, that's
Royces
a
that
good
were
point.
falling
Yeah,
apart.
that's-
Like
Exactly.
we'd be stretching.
Yeah,
probably.
what was garbage of that era? I mean,
Well,
there
that's the thing. Cars were thrown away. Everything was so cheap even back then that they were like, just get another one. It was almost like printers.
I mean, they probably left them on the side of the road.
No,
damn near.
I've said it before on like when I talk about old cars for Worldwide and stuff. Some of these cars, it's a miracle we have any left, because especially with how old they are now and what they seen as disposable 100 years ago, for them to still be around. I mean, like, and it's especially things like Model A's. Sure, they made a million, of them, but everyone threw them away. Even at those odds, it's a miracle there's so many of those around.
Well, I think a lot, the ones that were in the Depression still got driven in the Depression through the whole decade. And then World War II shut down all car production, so they got driven through World War II.
True.
And then at that point, people have been driving these cars for a decade, so then they just put them away in their barn or wherever else, and that's where.
Because they probably didn't have value. Just better
No,
to keep them.
they literally weren't. But if you had it's kind of like things got around COVID. It's like, if you got a running car, just keep it. It's one of those things. So then they go through a little bit of a period, and I'm not sure how fast Jake can pull these up. In 1932, they came out with this Series 302 is what they called it. It had a V8, looked pretty cool.
V8, not straight 8.
Whoa.
V8
A
in
V8.
32. So
Okay.
Ford had it. They did it.
So
they
their
did too,
own-
but just Pontiac.
Their own flathead, I assume,
Yes.
not overhead like Cadillac,
flathead.
right?
Sounds so
And
good.
it's a pretty cool
I love
looking
that.
like business coupe thing, and of course you could get it in different styles. Yeah,
Ooh.
that's the 308 or the 302.
Okay.
V8. And then the next year after that, they switched to a straight 8. So they had a 1 year only V8.
Oh.
But the straight 8s were really cool because that was the top of the line engine. That would have been the V12 of its time. Duesenbergs had straight 8s. Buicks had straight 8s. It was the desirable engine, but with a Pontiac, you could get a straight 8 at a Pontiac price point. It was the cheapest way you could get a straight 8 at the time. They found out with the V8, especially that early, it was a bit more expensive to produce. It's cheaper to produce the straight 8, but it's heavier, longer, and has some other drawbacks. But hey, cheaper to produce when you're making this kind of car or this volume of cars, you gotta stick with it. Moving on through time, they obviously I think I have a picture of this too. This is when we start seeing complete, like, not badge engineering, but cost savings where you can tell, oh, I can see what that is underneath. This is around the same time where they pretty much start to look like a Chevy Master because they use the same body and stuff like that. But they added, if you could see it, let's see here. I've got a picture of it.
So it's the first part of badge engineering.
Pretty much. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's a Pontiac. But so just imagine that's what a Chevy Master looks like, but they added the silver streaks to the side that differentiated them. You got a little bit more chrome, you got a little bit more flair, but it's essentially the same thing. I mean, I've got silver streaks myself.
A good match for you.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty cool. By 1937, they all switched to a B body, which they shared along with Oldsmobile, Cadillac, Buick, and LaSalle. They all had a version of this B body. But in 40 and 42, they came out with the Pontiac Torpedo, which I think you've at least heard of those. I'm going faster than Jake can keep up with here. Like I said, I'm kind of speeding through the older stuff because we got to get to the meat and potatoes here. They also had in 1941 a Streamliner, which is a pretty cool car. And as you can tell from the name, that's the Torpedo. The Streamliner, imagine a more streamlined version of this for those listening at home.
Squish it down.
But now, if you can tell by the year, something else is coming.
So they're making like an airflow competitor, a cheaper airflow.
Right.
Okay.
And so this one, you can see the chrome on the front grille, like that front center thing, continues up on the hood and down, whereas on the Chevy, it would not do that. So, like I said, this is the era where the more chrome meant, more money. But by 1942, Pontiac obviously made its last pre-war car, February 2nd, converted everything to war effort stuff. Fast forward, if you don't know what happens during World War II, they come back in 1948, and they essentially just released 1942 Pontiacs again. That's not unheard of. Pretty much every brand did that. 1949 is when they had their first all-new Pontiac. So they still have the Torpedo and the Streamliner, but they introduced the Chieftain. The Chieftain replaces the Torpedo, but they still have the Streamliner. The Chieftain is another one I've definitely heard of and seen. This is essentially the Bel Air, but Pontiac.
Yes.
So a little nicer. You can see the resemblance.
And then, the cool part was the light up chief head.
Yes, it had the symbol, the hood ornament that was the logo, is a Native American man protruding from the front of the car.
Oh,
and
way
he
cool.
would illuminate.
Yes.
I should have included a picture of that.
Yes, that was it's one of the coolest hood ornaments out there as far as
Yes.
like,
And they still go for money,
in the
just-
top 10. Yeah, a big deal on that as far as the design standpoint. And one thing that I remember from the mid 50s with this is I Love Lucy, when you watch the reruns where GM was doing the product placements and they bought a Pontiac.
I remember
and it was
this.
a big marketing deal for where they bought it. And actually that car sold at Bear Jackson about 10 years ago. It was in the Ron Pratt collection.
Really?
It still exists. But yeah, they bought that Pontiac to drive cross the country with Ethel and Fred. And, kid growing up, watching reruns on Nick at Night.
Oh, my mom had that on the TV
That
all
was
the
a
time.
big deal.
Yeah,
So yeah,
there's the
there's the
symbol.
Jeep. Yeah.
That is beautiful.
Yep.
Wow,
So-
that's so
I-
cool. And
I-
that lit up.
Yeah.
So how do they?
It's like fiber optic, I believe. Something.
I mean,
Yeah,
pretty
it's-
awesome for back in the day.
I don't know
being
exactly.
able
I
to
don't
do it.
exactly know, but either way, it's really cool. And they do still sell, like, people at memorabilia auctions and stuff sell just that
Yeah.
a lot.
And it has an amber glow to it, so it's legal, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Not like the Cyclops where I think like in the 48 Tuckers or whatever that they got rid of that pretty quick.
Wiped it
yeah.
out.
Yeah, dude, you just remind me the marketing and stuff back then was so great because, the such limited TV stuff, you have like 3 channels nationally.
Right.
And it's like if somebody could get on there and be like, I use Colgate for whatever, everyone's like, oh, wow, we got to go get some of that.
That's when it was big. That would make a difference.
Colgate actually was pretty big back then. They had a moment.
But car product placements are pretty normal now. But television is a whole new medium, and that GM would have been pioneers to do that, I feel like.
That's
Yeah.
Absolutely.
a brilliant move. Okay, so they had 4 engine options, which is great. So we're moving into the era of options, and I like as far as powertrain. Before, when I first started, it was this is the Pontiac. It has this engine. By this point, we were getting out to, do you want the 6-cylinder? Do you want the 8? Obviously, GM now, it's the 50s, or the late, whatever. They have a V8 now. Let's just say it. But you could get 2 6s and 2 8s. Obviously, different horsepowers. The Chieftain did have a couple of interesting options that you could get, though. You could option a tissue dispenser, a 7-tube radio, which
Whoa.
I know for any of you youngsters out there, the number of tubes in your radio directly related to sound clarity, at least at the time. So now we have like cars with 26 speakers in them. Having a 7-tube radio would have been a pretty big deal. But the real banger of an option was an auto/home shaver. You could
An electric razor.
Electric.
because you're a businessman on the go.
Right.
This was the first era of suburbs and stuff. People
Traveling
commuting.
salesman, door-to-door
Yes.
salesman.
So
yeah.
it'd be wired, obviously.
Yeah,
Just a
just a big corded curl
coming out of the
wire.
glove
and
box
just
and you
shaving,
just
and you're
shave
just
while you
getting
go?
hair clippings.
Oh God.
Right.
everywhere.
I mean, it seems like a good idea. And
You show up to work and you've just got you're just dusted with beard hair. But yeah, so then in 1950 they introduced something called the Catalina, and much like we were just looking at Bob, it was a pillarless coupe. They kind of made it as a halo car. I mean, nothing was
So Bob just pulled up in a 2007 CL600 was Elliot's referencing to, and we paused. You probably didn't notice, but we paused the podcast for a moment there
because we're car guys, and we had to go see the
the
car.
editing magic you wouldn't have known, but
Yeah,
never know.
Oh, you'll
yeah,
know.
so there's the pillarless coupe with the chieftain head there and the hood ornament. Very pretty thing.
That's beautiful.
And like I said, cruising along because we want to get to the good stuff. 52, they discontinued the Streamliner. 54, they added the Star Chief, which was kind of like the name of it. It's still not above the Catalina, but it's just a different model of Pontiac. But this is where basically they took the body and stretched it 11 inches. It's like it looks like the Chieftain, but stretched. 1955, as we all know from Chevys, 55, 56, and 57 were big for Bel Airs. Changes every year. Same with Pontiac. Pontiac had a version of those cars. You had the Strato Street V8 with 173 horsepower. And interestingly, they just discontinued the 6-cylinder models, where you could still get a 6-cylinder Chevy Bel Air. In fact, most of them were. In 1956, Bunky Knudsen is how I would say it, but Knudsen, as some people would say, becomes the general manager of Pontiac, and he brings with him his new heads of engineering, E.M. Estes and John DeLorean, who, like I said, is a fascinating man himself.
know that name.
That is Mr. Knudsen. And then, so basically he comes back in at a great time for the company because in the 50s, everybody's buying stuff. This is full-blown, drive-up movie theaters, car hops, stuff like that. Every image you have of two-tone cars comes from this era, and they decide this was the time, 1956, to completely redo the brand's image, or at least start to. So they take away the silver streaks from the hood and the deck lid. Obviously, that's something that differentiated the cars for the whole time. And then they took them from the 57 model like weeks before they were rolling out, which was a pretty late catch. But you were allowed to do stuff like that back then. The same year, in 1957, they introduced the Bonneville as a limited edition as the start of the Star Chief.
And those are big.
Yes.
Big. I mean, huge cars. In the
And
50s,
that showed off
the Impala body.
Yes. Well, that is the 59, I think. But it doesn't matter. It had the first fuel injected V8. Obviously, Chevy was doing that same thing.
Right.
It's a GM brand. But these were the same price. There's the fuel injected engine right there. The thing is, these didn't sell that particularly well because they were the same price of a Cadillac. And as you learned from the Corvette thing, if you didn't get a Cadillac for Cadillac money, it pretty much didn't work. It's just the way it was. You know, Cadillac meant something back then. I really got to reiterate that. I mean, it was a big deal if you were a Cadillac family. Like that was America's, other than the Duesenberg, but which is long gone. But
right
now, weren't the 50s cars? Isn't that when the wide track branding started?
Yes, correct.
Because I don't know of it of the 50s. I know of it when they did it. I think back in the 90s.
Yep.
They brought it back.
If Jake goes back to that previous image, it shows 1959. They changed the traditional Pontiac symbol we all know now, the arrowhead. But that is the car where Knudsen noticed he thought the bodies, because they were so big and they had so much going on, he thought they looked awkward sitting on 1958 frames. So he makes the track of the whole car wider by 5 inches, which is no joke to just be like, I want this to be 5 inches wider. And it worked. So obviously the car looks proportionate now. The wheels fill out the wheel wells, stuff like that. But what they decided to do brilliantly, and here's an ad for it, is they decided to advertise that they were wider and wide track vehicles. So basically, they were able to now say, hey, we're luxurious and we definitely handle better than the competition because we're 5 inches wider. I mean, if you know anything about race cars and even just making your tires wider, that makes a big difference in handling. And now, not to say a 59 Cadillac handles like it's on rails, but compared to other things of its era, it would have. And like I said, I like that they ran with the marketing.
Well, I imagine there was a lot of people that thought that the cars, the late 50s, was getting just ridiculous looking.
Yes.
Of course, everyone talks about the fins and all that stuff, but there's definitely people going, what is all this crap?
Yeah.
And obviously it all came changing dramatically.
Right. So 59 was the crescendo of it for everybody, for Cadillac, for, anybody. And so 1960, they get rid of the tail fins, and they get rid of the split grille, which had become a Pontiac staple as well. But then in 1961, they had added it right back. So that was kind of a funny one.
They didn't like it.
They were like,
they were mad.
Okay. But in 1961, and this one I could go on about for a while, they introduced one of their most important models. They introduced the Tempest. Now, we know what that kind of went on to be, but in 1961, it was this amazing platform. It's a unibody, which is crazy for the time. Obviously, they had the Corvair to kind of work with on that. Yeah, I know. It doesn't look special.
The humble beginnings of the GTO right there.
That is.
So
Yes.
a few other cars shared this platform, the Buick Skylark, the Buick Special, the Skylark, and the
Make it
old
smaller.
F85. Now, interestingly, you could get a different versions of this, but the base motor of this
Hideous.
was an inline slant 4. So slant is, it's at an angle. They had slant 6s and stuff at the time. But what they did was they derived it from the right. See, this is a picture of. They derived it from the right block of a 389 V8.
So it's a V8 just chopped in half.
Yes.
They didn't even want to put it upright.
Correct.
That made too much work.
They just made the right side of the block.
The whole car doesn't
and
look
made
like
a new
much work.
camshaft crankshaft so it would balance. Now, however, that didn't work out very well because people gave it the nickname the hay baler because it was so shaky still. I mean,
Right.
I can imagine. It had an optional V8, but at the price point, everything just wasn't that popular. But the main thing that was really cool, so John DeLorean had a big hand in this car. He was unibody, lighter and smaller, so things weren't body on frame anymore. It was an early adopter of that. But he introduced the torque tube kind of design on this model. So that was something that had been seen a while back. But this is the first, it's like a Corvette. It really has a front engine torque tube to a transaxle. So it has pretty much 50-50 weight distribution.
I had no idea.
And the thing that the public loved about it is because it was a torque tube, and you see how it actually bends. It's actually flexible steel inside of the tube. They called it rope drive, which was not true. It makes people think that it's like there's really rope between your thing. But what it allowed them to do is make it have a flat floor. Got rid of the transmission tunnel and the floor hump that every other car had. So now they're able to advertise a light, compact, pretty cheap car with a flat floor. So it's like, oh, it's comfortable for interior occupants.
But they didn't keep this.
No, they did not. They walked away from it pretty much like 1964.
Oh,
I
wow.
imagine the warranty claims with all that stuff,
God.
with all the
Yeah, the roof.
You could see the bend. I mean,
Yeah,
Right.
just bent in the picture. I mean, it's
Yeah.
already.
as far as if you ever had a car with a whiny torque tube or whatever, when the bearings and
I
that go
have,
out,
right.
I imagine that didn't last more than a couple of years. With
but
the
it's a
build quality
great
of the
idea.
60s. Yeah,
It
obviously,
really was.
I mean,
It was ahead of
that's-
its time.
That's the C5 Corvette is the next time we see
Yeah.
that in a GM car.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, yes, just totally. And it also goes to show the time period. So yes, it was, and this is important because that comes up later. So what we see as now is GM is just one company, because it is. But back then, they really were separate companies allowed to do their own things under the GM umbrella. Pontiac had its totally own technology. This didn't get shared with anybody else. This was a Pontiac exclusive, great thing. The brands were actually still competing back then, even though they were under the same corporate ownership. They were still trying to outsell each other and innovate and push within the brands. And it's something we don't see anymore, especially with like Nissan and Infiniti, that whole thing. It's like, it's the same car, it's like they don't even try.
Right.
So 1961, same year, the Tempest wins Motor Trend Car of the Year. Not shocking. This would have been perfect. I mean, it's an an economic, cheap, innovative car. I've got a picture of the cover of that, but not super important. There you go. That's also when that meant something too back then, because People magazines, print media was still big.
Man,
So-
I never would have known. I mean, I guess I've never seen a 61 Pontiac, but how many years
no.
did they do the torque tube?
Like I said, I believe I've double checked my notes. I'm pretty sure it's just like a couple. It's
'Cause
like
by
61 to
64
64. 64, it's back to engine trans, traditional layout,
Right.
drive shaft.
Because 64 is a big year.
Yes. I did want to mention, just interestingly, because I mentioned the unibody and the Corvair. So Pontiac was going to make a Corvair. They already had the stuff and they can share. They just didn't often. They were going to call it the Polaris. Like, it was pretty much going to happen. They had a full scale clay model and everything. But Knutson's daughter had been seriously injured in a Corvair crash, which is like the first time I've heard of somebody at GM being in a Corvair crash, back when the Corvair was still fairly new at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So just because of that, he was like, I don't want Pontiac to have any kind of version of this car. So I did think that was fascinating.
I
I'm
don't
sorry
blame
that
him.
his daughter got in an accident.
Yeah, but I mean,
Unsafe at any speed.
Exactly.
That's
it was not a very safe car.
what Ralph Nader said.
So blah, blah, blah. They've introduced the Grand Prix in 1962. It was interesting because it was a coupe with bucket seats. And now we're inching towards what,
What
we're
everybody
getting
wants
at
to hear about.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Bring it on.
So let's get forward. So
64.
Yeah. So 1964, the Tempest moves to the A-body platform, which is then shared with other things: the Skylark, the Cutlass, the Le Mans, etc. So this is now a 64 Tempest / Le Mans. DeLorean comes up with
Stud.
the GTO.
The stud.
Yes. And so GM, I didn't know this either. GM had an unwritten edict where they can't have an engine larger than a certain displacement, in this case 5.4 liters, in what they called intermediate cars. So
Right.
this was an intermediate car. DeLorean kind of went beyond everybody and did it anyway with the partnering of an ad agency. So basically it was like him and Pontiac's ad department were like, this will be a great idea, not knowing how well it would be received. Thusly making the first muscle car.
Yeah.
So they make the GTO, which stands for Gran Turismo Omologato.
It was an
Omologato.
option package on the Tempest. It wasn't its own model.
So it was
And he's-
not the GTO. You had to buy a Tempest.
You had to buy a Tempest
with the GTO package.
You had to buy a Tempest Le Mans
Oh,
and then option it to be a GTO.
Okay.
So technically the full name of the car was the Pontiac Tempest Le Mans GTO.
and GTO stands for
Gran Turismo Omologato.
okay.
It's not, I think I'm saying that right. And it's funny, there's ads. This is where they got the cool ads with the tigers getting in and out of it and stuff like that. One ad that I watched, again, like we can't do video here, but one of them said it's the ultimate driving machine, which is funny because they obviously lost that one.
Yeah, clearly.
Yep.
Of course, the GTOs are all 6.4 liter V8s, so way above the old 5.4 liter violation. He didn't just violate it a little bit; he went a full liter. But you had between 325 horsepower, 348 horsepower, depending on how you optioned it. Now, what's interesting is this was a total gamble on DeLorean's part, Pontiac's part, and everything like that. And they just kind of said, no one's going to want this. Maybe we'll sell 5,000 of them. Their target sales projection was 5,000 units, and they ended up selling 32,000, a little more than 32,000 in the first year. So needless to say, it majorly exceeded their expectations.
Word got out. The Beach Boys sung about it.
Uh-huh.
And it kept going.
And muscle cars were born.
It literally is. So, it's hard to explain because we already know what happened.
Right.
But it's kind of like the Corvette Formula 2, where it was like no one had thought of, what if we put a big engine in a family car? Will people like it? Of course, we all know now.
No,
of
we
course
all want
you love
one.
it. But it was a major gamble back then. It was like, no, you either have a family car or you have a sporty car. It was like, this was, like I said, they literally invented the muscle car, which then every other brand followed suit. I mean,
I think, the sports cars were for the rich and the stylish and the lavish. And then, in the 50s and 60s, it was, you bought a car for a purpose. And the purpose was to go to work and go home, or bring the kids and go home.
Yes.
And this just upended everything and brought the muscle car.
Exactly.
It's
awesome. Like I said, and they are cool. They got that name, obviously, because, they're literally muscular looking, sounding, driving. It's cool. By 1965, the next year, DeLorean gets promoted to be the head of Pontiac. The entire Pontiac lineup wins Car of the Year for Martian, which I don't think they do that anymore.
Yeah. No.
They couldn't even just. Pontiac was so good at this time that they were like, all of them, they are the Car of the Year. So it was a great time. GTO eventually gets split, I think, that year from being a Tempest Le Mans to just being a GTO.
Right.
Now it's its own. Now it still looks like them, but it is a thing. And just like we talked about on Corvettes, how people were kind of changing things, very popular of Le Mans people to up badge to GTOs. This is one of the first cases of up badging.
Wow.
It
Like
really is.
most of the GTOs and the 64 or 65s were Le Mans that have been badged up.
So 64 was the first. So if you have now a 64 Le Mans Tempest Le Mans GTO.
Yeah, you have to say it the American way. Le Mans. Pontiac
The Le Mans. But what's one of those worth? Like if you were to buy one now to find a first.
It varies wildly because they had the triple carbureted
the
ones.
tri-power.
The tri-power was a big deal for this factory. There's a lot of variables,
Yes.
but they can be $100,000 car if everything lines up.
Drivers can be 30s.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's to have a car in the 30s that literally is the beginning of the muscle car era.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
But they were, as Elliot mentioned out there, they sold a lot of them. So it's not like a Hemi Cuda or Superbird where they only made a couple hundred.
But how
of
many
them.
are left?
Well, right, and that's kind of back to these cars were driven hard, and they were still pretty inexpensive.
I see a lot of them.
I do see them a lot at auctions.
You see, that's the thing where you see a lot of GTOs, but you see a lot of Chevelles, and it's just like,
yes,
man,
that
so
I do
many,
see.
so many Chevelles got saved, which is so odd to but they made a lot of them, obviously. So
now, 1966. Also, I know we're going on and on about the GTO. They also introduced this really cool engine that I think Jake would like. They introduced an overhead cam 6-cylinder, a straight 6 with an overhead cam. I had a picture of it in there. It's pretty cool. Like, looks like a straight 6, and it's got like a little cam hump off to the side. And these were a pretty unique motor. I mean, obviously, this was not your top of the line motor. But it was a really interesting, they hadn't made an overhead cam.
New technology. Yeah.
Like, really.
it's the first thing that gets ripped out when somebody does their
absolutely. Their V8 conversion. Yeah.
So in 1967, the Firebird gets introduced. Obviously, not unlike the GTO or whatever. This is very clearly a rebadged Camaro, but because it's Pontiac, it's a little nicer. You get a little bit more body work. You get some nicer features. Interestingly enough, at least in like all of my life, I've seen countless Camaros of this era. Really rare to see these, and I don't know if it's just our area, but even at auctions, they're every once in a while.
And I don't think the Pontiacs bring any kind of premium at all. It might be a little less than like a 67 to 69 Camaro.
Yeah, and I think they look cool. That I don't have a picture for Jake, but the taillights are cool because they're they're rectangular and like slits. They're not the sort. I mean, it's just
Tyler, you don't like it?
Yeah,
You're not
I
a
mean,
fan?
there's nothing
No, it's just-
wow about the rear end of them.
It's just interesting that like I thought it was cooler in the Camaros. Is all. And, like,
Yeah.
It looks like more of like a touring, kind of like a not as racy version of a Camaro in that picture.
and that's kind of what Firebirds always were. Nicer Camaros. You know, that's kind of the thing. Obviously, this is in response to the Ford Mustang, the Camaro and Firebird. Mustang kind of had that one. Well, few year head start on them.
Yeah.
1967, yeah. See, intermediate cars like all the Tempest, the Le Mans, and the GTO all got minor facelifts. So the GTO got this, which unfortunately fake hood scoop. It's the cool little thing. In Triple X, I think it shoots missiles.
Triple X, the Vin Diesel,
Yeah.
the lesser Vin Diesel
Wow,
movie,
that's a movie
Fast
I've
and
never seen.
Furious.
You haven't seen Triple
Nor
X?
do I want to.
So good.
Oh, come on. No,
It does not hold up, and it's cheesy. and
Tyler,
it's
are you
so
going to be the
good.
verdict on this? Is that a good movie or
It is
not?
not good.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, but at the time, it was really cool.
What was that
Yeah.
movie we watched together in your garage that was amazingly bad?
Oh,
Sorry,
that's
I'm
one where they destroyed the
tangenting.
Carrera GT, Red Line.
Oh,
Red
Line.
Line.
No,
Now,
that
that
is-
was so bad. That was good.
Really bad. Triple X was a pretty big budget film.
It was a huge budget film, but it's like
It's
you
very
know,
cheesy.
Vin Diesel becomes Secret Agent Man, which is what the Vin Diesel Fast and Furious Dominic Toretto became that anyway in the Fast and Furious films. He wasn't just like a street racing guy stealing VCRs.
Yeah.
So it basically the Triple X franchise became the Fast and Furious franchise as far as the ridiculousness of things blowing up and all that.
Yeah.
But yes.
So yeah, you get this is just kind of incremental stuff. So 67, they got a little bit of a facelift. Interestingly, Ed Cole, president of everything, just banned cars with multiple carburetors after this. So the tri-powered is no more. I don't know if this is a complication. Like obviously 3 carbs, it is harder to tune, because you never really know how well it's running. It's like if a car's running on 2, it still sounds pretty good and feels good.
Probably struggling service.
Yes.
Yeah, I would guess it would
get
get too difficult.
So that's gone, but they did then, in response to that, bump the engine size up to a 6.6 liter V8. So, you lost 2 carbs, but
400.
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
In American terms. Right. Cubic inches.
Right. Well, I know we just all do liters now, even in America.
Yeah.
So just figured. 1968, the GTO changes. So it gets the Endura front bumper.
Yes.
It kind of looks a little bit like the Firebird, but they were kind of introducing the integrated bumper before it was legally mandated. So at this time, Corvettes still had steel bumpers, everything else, but I think they knew it was coming.
Yep.
Now these, depending on the trim, because obviously you could get the Judge
Yes.
package.
Here comes the judge.
That is, like I said, absolutely iconic.
Yeah, iconic
Love
is
that
where I was
so
gonna go with
much.
this.
And
And you're
these
just-
do like a Judge convertible with all the factory air and all that stuff. I mean, I think I've seen them at Bear Jackson bring.
Right, and I believe it was some kind of skit where somebody would say, "Here comes the judge. Here comes
Yes,
the judge
they're
coming
great.
in,"
And I
and
don't-
it was in people's people just were saying it a lot.
And
They
I'm gonna
thought,
get shot for this. I don't think it's a particularly good looking car, but it's menacing. I don't think it's beautiful. I don't think the side profile. I've never saw one of those and thought that it was like a timeless design, but it always looked menacing. Like that's something
Yeah.
that if I saw it on the street when it was new and I was a kid in a muscle car, I would be afraid because I'd be like, okay, I don't know what that is,
well,
but it looks mean.
everybody compares the Chevelle.
Yeah.
In 1970, the GTO, which looked like this in 1970, and the Olds 442 in 1970. All 3 very iconic looks and styles, and basically the peak of the style of the cars.
No,
As
and
far
I
as when
like
they
the
got
442, but that's my aunt had one, a yellow one that she called Big Bird, and that was.
That'll ruin the 442 for you.
Yeah, it did it. But I mean, I wish I knew where that car was. I'd love to have it.
Yeah. So this is also 68 is where they introduced their Ram Air package, which they hold on to for quite a while.
and a hood tachometer.
Hood
It's fun.
tack. See, this one has it. Still neat, to look out through the windshield and see it just the tack. It was, obviously a racing thing. Now they did have a really funny marketing campaign, which would never fly today. Not because it's so bad, but it's just because it's whatever. They would introduce, if you got an automatic GTO in this era, you could get what's called a his and hers shifter. So most of these were automatics, and most of them was just regular down the thing. But in this body style, you could get the his and her shifter. So the her side was just putting it straight into drive, but his, you could push it over and knock it back up and shift through the gears.
They advertised it.
And they
as this?
said yes.
Oh, you could do
and
that
on
now.
that, it's like a something for her and
boy.
gears for him.
Could you imagine trying to do that now? A
That's
car
what I'm
coming
saying.
out with a
It
his
would
and hers,
never fly.
and the hers is just a one gear.
Well, no, I mean it's still had park
Canceled
neutral
immediately.
reverse.
What there's all kinds of
Did you
advertising
find
where
it
they're
is
talking
and
about, yeah,
Yes,
so
see,
easy a
his and
woman can
hers.
drive. That's
Yeah,
was a lot
boy.
of advertisements in the 30s and 40s
Well-
where easy to drive cars like my Chrysler, my 46 Chrysler. But
And they did it. I mean, other companies, Ferrari and all that stuff. When they brought out their F1 transmission, it was kind of like, oh, we also put an auto mode in it for your woman. Like they said it without
in
saying it.
Italy, you could,
Well, in
Again,
Italy, you can say it.
remember check out our earlier podcast, and you'll know why they could do that.
Right.
So 69, they had a new Grand Prix. Not like I said, this isn't stuff that everyone's like, oh wow, crazy. But the interesting thing on that one was the coupe sales were really slow at that time, 68, because obviously it's like who was buying a Grand Prix over a GTO or even a Le Mans? It's like just
And with the smaller car with the big engine.
yeah. So they made a deal with Chevy to make a platform, and if Pontiac could have exclusivity to it for 1 year. So the 69 Grand Prix, the new one, they sold 120,000 units. So they
Whoa.
upped their sales more than 4 times of what they sold in 68. So it was a much needed refresh. Now, I don't get people love them, and I'm sure I've seen them at a car show. It's not one that I flock to personally.
I'm torn.
But it is interesting. So didn't Chevy use this, went on to become the Monte Carlo.
Right.
So
I kind of like the beak.
and I
mean,
think
it is-
the boat tail Rivieras and stuff for all on this
yes,
big body
that kind of
yeah.
thing. And
I
Boat Tail
kind of like
Rivieras
that.
are cool.
I like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's a significantly bigger car, though. If you see the two in person, I know it's difficult on the screen with this angle because the design language is kind of there, but the GTO is like a compact sports car compared to this thing. This thing
Right.
is huge.
But we're in the 70s now.
Yeah, so now it starts to
So
go.
do we just skip that and go right
Yeah,
to
I mean, it's
No,
pretty quick.
things
77?
just start. Yeah, it's a good idea to
Yeah.
just skip.
We're gonna skip through most
the
of it.
things comes crashing down in the 70s as far as
Yeah.
the fun for the most part. I feel like
69 is worth mentioning. DeLorean has done so much for Pontiac. He just becomes the general manager of Chevrolet. So they're like, do this at Chevy. Like this, you've saved this brand, even though it didn't need saving. They were doing well. So yeah, now it becomes the oil embargo. 1970s when they mandated everything start taking unleaded gas. So they didn't really know how to keep up with that. So it was just lower compression ratio, this and that. I mean, you have some cars you love from this era, but overall,
there's only the Smoky and the Bandit Trans Am. That's the only thing I
mine.
talk
That
about.
is mine.
Right?
Yep.
And it was a 76 in the movie. Is this in your notes?
I had it that they
It
came
was a
out
76
here.
in the
So
movie.
it's a 76
I
in
thought
the
it was
movie,
77.
but they put the 77 nose on it because
That's
it
why I
wasn't
thought it
out
was
yet.
77.
So that was when they unveiled the cat eyes.
And this is the one. This is on my bucket list. I've not
Right.
had one of
They're-
these. I want one of these so bad. So bad.
These bodies actually handle really well. These Fisher bodies, they're great handling cars for their size. The power is gone, but it has a faux hood that still shakes. It's still attached to the engine, but it doesn't
Did it have the 6.6 and 76?
6.6 was still
did.
around in the
What
400.
was like what 180
Zero
horsepower?
horsepower.
Yeah, 450.
Nothing.
So,
This was the era of big displacement, no horsepower.
Yeah.
and then so they called it the Bandit package, but it's a special edition package where it had the snowflake with the gold and all that stuff. But Smokey and the Bandit, the second highest grossing film in 1977, behind Star Wars.
Ah,
Yes.
So
see.
another big moment in marketing where holy crap, do sales explode overnight as far as
Yeah.
Of
Pontiac
these.
coming back, because everybody wanted them. My parents both had them in high school. My dad wrecked one, my mom wrecked one.
That's the
Wow.
story of these cars. I think
They were just Kansas
And I'm
rednecks
betting this is
dream
what
right
got
there.
my dad to get, and we'll talk about that. I'm sure
yeah,
when
it's,
he
it's
gets,
coming right
it's
up.
coming right up.
I just
but-
had a couple of things to
yeah,
mention.
this
in
is
there.
probably what got
But
to my
it's
dad
funny
buying one.
because they did this, and then they're still trying to figure out how to get performance. So they do those turbo Trans Ams for a few years
Yes.
that are very goofy.
Well, they were horrible, right? They were terribly
horrible.
received.
They,
yes.
they were very goofy.
They
but
also
still,
had a hood tack or hood gauge, not tack.
right.
But
But
you can make those fast, but out of the box they were garbage, right?
Yeah.
these were all very
It was-
long in the tooth.
It was all, like I said, and back then it was marketing trying to make it seem faster than it was because it was like everybody kind of knew, not kind of, everyone knew it.
Well, and I remember the white with the blue,
Yes.
the pace car. The turbo version.
Yes.
Yes.
Was it? It was probably an
It
Indy
wasn't
Pace.
blue. It was all white.
I thought it had a blue trim around the. Did it not around the chicken?
They had one at Bear Jackson not that long ago.
And maybe
which
not. Maybe
I know.
I feel like it had blue trim,
Bob,
but I
Bob
could
had
be wrong.
one and I
He
made
did
a
have
video
one.
about it a long time ago. But now it was white with a lot of silver in it and the kind of the arrow wheels on it. But yeah, there needed to be a big refresh again. And DeLorean, of course, went on to make his own company and have a cocaine deal go bad and all this stuff and
That'll
lose
be a
his
future
cars.
podcast.
That's what I'm saying.
But,
That could be its own thing.
But Pontiac gets into a new era, right?
Right. The only models I want to mention, because they get mentioned later, is they do come out with the Sunbird in 1976, because that was a car that was very formative to me. It was based on the Chevy Vega.
Wow, I didn't know.
So I
that
didn't know that
early.
either. I didn't know it was that early. 76. And then in 1977, they roll out the Iron Duke 4-cylinder, which is one of Jake's favorite engines. I don't know why. A low output.
Jake is shaking his
Jake,
head.
why
You're
is
wrong.
that?
Sorry, it's not one of his favorites. He wants to troll and swap one into something good at some point.
Yeah. I've always
Yeah.
wanted to get like a fire damaged
See.
supercar, which
There you
Freddie
go.
ruined that market.
Oh, so like it's Jake saying he wants to take like a Lamborghini Gallardo and then pop the hood and then it's
an Iron
an
Duke.
Iron
An
Duke.
Iron Duke.
So
yeah.
the Iron Duke, it's Pontiac. They came with that. I mean, it's just a
That
turd,
is-
but they used it a lot up until the 90s in various different things.
Right.
And it's what powers all of our current mail trucks, the Grumman, whatever that thing
They're
is.
still around?
Until recently.
Yeah,
but
until
well,
recently.
yeah,
but
that
we're not
went
seeing
away.
those things. Anyway.
the Iron Duke.
Increasingly similar designs, because it's a tough era. They're pretty much straight up just taking Chevy stuff and slapping a
Yes.
Pontiac badge on it. That's just what has
But
happened.
there's Rob's. There's
1982.
Rob's dream right
There's
there.
my dream.
That's where he wants to go
Yes.
back and relive it.
All right,
all
this is
again.
bringing me back. So,
80
quick story on this. This is 1982.
Yeah, 1982 is we're looking at the screen, folks. Is the major redesign of the Firebird, complete departure.
Yes.
from the Smokey and the Bandit era.
So my family, they were not car people at all. Although some of the cars that they've owned, my mom's daily driver when she was young was an Edsel, which is probably the worst car ever made. My dad had a Volvo station wagon. I mean, some odd stuff.
I have a Volvo station.
And then, well, it was like a 1970, early 70s. But when it was about the time, it would have been right in 82. It would have been new. My dad went to the dealership. My mom had a Celica coupe.
Cool.
Silver Celica coupe, which was kind of, back then was not bad. My dad wanted to have a sports car like mom, but she said, no, you got 2 kids, you're getting a family car. So he goes to the Pontiac dealership to buy whatever the popular Pontiac 4-door would have been then. So, he's my dad, we passed away 10 years ago. God love him. He was not very good at negotiations. He was not very good. He didn't know anything about cars at all. But he got to the dealership. 2 hours later, he comes home with a 1982 red Firebird. And my mom exploded. She was so pissed. I mean, she was just, I was like in the basement. She's in the corner. You could hear her just lighting him up for this car. But I mean, it was the coolest. I didn't care. I was out there looking at the car because I'd never seen anything like it. We'd never had anything like that. The Celica wasn't a sports car. I mean, maybe it was back then, but I didn't look at it as that. But that Firebird was so cool. And then I was the coolest kid on the block because we would stand at the bus stop and my dad would get up. He would get up and go to work and he would turn out and every morning we'd have 10 of those kids. We're all standing by the bus and he would flash the pop-up lights and those kids would go wild. So I was like the most popular kid and all of a sudden I loved cars because of that car.
Yeah.
And if any of you listening, watching, have a red 1982 Firebird, please, comments, whatever. I want one. You can't find them. They're garbage junk. None of them really survived.
In the styling department, as far as this and the Camaro shared, that the Firebird was so much better looking.
Oh,
it,
so
it,
much.
It won
So much.
big time.
And this was the beginning of, and I'm glad you mentioned the headlights. That was one of the features that differentiated them. Camaro, fixed headlights, always. But not always. But in this era, it was, you'd get it was a fancy feature. Remember, Ferraris had pop-up headlights.
Oh, yeah.
It was a really cool deal. And speaking of marketing helping things, of course, this body style was further, immortalized by being in Knight Rider, which was a very popular TV show.
My favorite show.
And how could it make a car look any cooler?
They gave Hasselhoff cars. And so he had one. Actually, I think he had 3, but the last one is an 85 that he owned for 4 years. It is currently for sale.
Oh,
oh,
And it's a little rough, but I mean, it's serviceable.
The real car.
What?
Like
The
his.
real
It's
car.
his. It was the one he had.
It's Hasselhoff's driver for 4 years.
Well, what are you waiting
And then
for?
they want $40,000.
All right,
for it.
offer him
geez.
20. Be one
That's
of us.
less than
Look,
I thought.
I'll come in at 15. He'll come in at 18,
Yeah.
and you can get it for 20.
There's a picture of that beautiful man,
That
laying across
beautiful
the
man.
hood.
Shirtless.
Well,
I
he
can
always
think
does
of-
the
oh, yeah,
buttons
low-
all the way
low
down.
buttons. Okay, I'll
and
take it.
this because it's in California, it's the same license plate.
Really?
That he had his own vanity plate on there, and it has all the documentation, and it's a whole YouTube channel that is devoted to Hasselhoff Knight Rider era Trans Ams, and this guy has it, and he wants a lot of money for a rough Trans Am.
Come on, if you're watching, sell it to him for 20.
Let
Please.
us let us know in the
Please.
comments. Do you want to see Tyler get a legit Hasselhoff?
Oh, absolutely. And with
Right.
Hasselhoff, the only thing
But it would be fun to take Hasselhoff's because it's already kind of rough.
Yeah.
and it's Hasselhoff's, but make it into a Knight Rider like
That
video
would be
games.
I think that would be the most epic
That'd be
thing
really
ever
cool.
to do that. That would be
where you combine that pedigree together.
People would watch that. I think a lot of people
remember,
would watch
it's
that.
on brand for you. You had Van Damme's Bentley.
That's true.
I suppose I'm
So-
not paying. I paid less for a Bentley Azure owned by Jean-Claude Van Damme. I paid
was a nice
way
car.
less.
Yeah.
But this is David Hasselhoff. Like,
If you saw the pictures
The
of
Hoff.
it, I mean,
Yeah.
Jake, you can Google it up. It's the Hasselhoff Trans Am for sale.
Hasselhoff
It'll
Trans Am
probably
for sale.
pop up, but no, not doing it.
no,
no.
don't just say no. Do not say
Consider
no.
it.
I'm not
You're not
buying
knowing
a
that.
200 horsepower Trans Am with the paint falling off for $40,000.
That's literally
I
what
don't
you
care
do
that
now with
Hasselhoff-
everything you have.
I don't care that
It's no
Hasselhoff
different.
farted in the seats, but it's cool.
It doesn't have it does not have the Recaro seats.
No, Hasselhoff farted in the seats.
Oh yeah, see, you'd love that.
That's
That's
whatever.
literally you buy. All right.
Okay, whatever. Commenters,
Forget it.
let us know. Okay. If Jake's probably pulling this up, which is going to derail my next segment
Completely.
but he doesn't even have to.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Okay, yeah, don't worry about it. Okay, so 1940, 84. Not only did the C4 Corvette come out, but
Had to
Pontiac
mention that.
introduced.
There it is.
Oh,
there it
let's
is
see
for
here.
sale.
Oh, look at that.
That is
Don't have
decently
a
Oh
rough
my
there.
gosh.
that is decently
Oh,
rough.
he'll take 15. Come on.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
I think so.
I need to see his name on the title.
it's all there.
For-
He has all the pictures, the paperwork, and all that stuff. It's the real deal.
Wow.
He raffled
You
it off
have
after
to
he drove it
have
for
that.
4 years for charity, I think.
For
Yeah.
you to turn that into a Knight Rider car would be the best thing ever. Like right? Am I wrong? Am I wrong here, Jake? What do you think?
The tires look weirdly small.
He's saying the tires look like they're wrong, but
Of all
no,
those were what 80.
Oh,
that's
that's
what
what they
Trans Am
had.
wheels
it
might
would
be.
be fun.
that's the tires might be different.
Might be
but
in-
My
Incorrect.
my audience, when you look at demographics, my audience
Oh.
does skew a bit older, but that's a stretch.
Yeah, I guess
that would be
the kids don't have a soft spot for Knight Rider.
I mean,
No, maybe
I'm
not.
too. Elliot and I are too young for Knight Rider to even remember it other than
I
reruns.
did watch it though.
So, but it didn't. It wouldn't have captured like our hearts like
Yes.
someone as old as Rob. So
So what you're saying is the reason why I'm pining for this is because I'm old.
You do remember? You remember the feeling Knight Rider gave you on TV?
Well,
I remember
yeah.
it from reruns.
not just that though, but it's right up his alley. It's garbage, but it's like rare and unique,
Not
and he
for 40
could make
grand.
it something good.
not for 40. No.
No, not for 40,
It would
but
have
for
to start
20,
much
sure.
lower. Yeah.
What the? That's a.
Wow, yeah, when they
That's
made the
the
Mustang
bad
out of
Knight
gas.
Rider
This was
reboot.
like the late early 2000s one.
What are you? Why are you
Okay,
sullying a
we're
name?
getting way off
Yeah, okay.
track here. Jake,
Don't you
Jake is-
sully a bad
Anyway.
name.
Anyway, so
Pull
you
up
said
the Fiero.
84.
So 84, they came out with the Fiero. It's a mid-engine
God.
2-seat coupe. We all know what this is.
Worse.
What?
Let's go back to the.
It's a
I'd
mid-engine.
rather talk about that than the Fiero. That's
it's a
complete
Mustang.
garbage.
No, it's
No,
a-
they're not. No, now,
Those
hold
are
on.
complete. What are you talking
honestly,
about?
I'm not going to spend too long on the Fiero because
Oh.
you could.
What?
No,
in
the
world?
original one.
There's
yeah.
Hall & Oates posted on a
Which,
Fiero.
how
And that
cool
isn't
could that
hauling
be?
anything.
Yes, it is. That is Daryl Hall and John Oates
Oh, that
making
is-
that car look cool.
Oh God! All right, you guys enjoy your chat. I'm just gonna drink.
Yeah,
over
you,
here.
okay, you do that. But anyway, this car is very significant. So this again could have its own thing almost. They didn't make it for long enough. But GM management didn't want this car to happen. Pontiac had to develop this under the pretense of something else. GM essentially is like, we do not want another two-seater sports car. We already have a Corvette. There's no need in our entire lineup for another one. And not that it would compete with it, just don't want one. So they pitched it as, well, it's not a sports car. It's a fuel-efficient commuter car that just happens to have two seats. And GM's upper brass was like, oh, well, if that's the case, that's fine. And that was the era.
because they
it was.
offered it with the Iron Nuke,
Yes.
No comment.
Well, that
Which
was the
is-
only engine you could get at the time. I
which
think.
is silly.
Yes. So
you're saying the car was conceived poorly?
yes. No, and like I said, I could go on about just the Fiero, but the very first version of it, it was just neat to see. We hadn't seen a mid-engine American car since the Corvair.
Right.
There's a reason for that.
And
you know,
it gave birth to all kinds of replica cars, all like a
Yes.
Ferrari
Yeah,
ripoff,
we
the
love
Maras,
those.
on these.
all the
You're
all
not
the
selling
ripoffs.
this to me on any
just
level.
So
This is
funny that
hideous.
okay, here we go. That we can make this into a Ferrari 308 or make it into anything. But I think the biggest contribution the Pontiac Fiero has to modern society is the first car in the Fast and Furious franchise to go into space.
that's true. This is worth noting.
Did you see the last one? Tyrese
I've
and
never seen a
Ludacris?
Fast
No,
and
it's the one
Furious
before
movie.
the last one.
What?
I've never seen a Fast
my
and Furious movie. There's no
God.
reason. I've been a muscle car. You know, I
They
no.
had muscle cars in the second one with
Well,
the.
but they were
the
like
cars in the
they were
first
like
one.
just doing all kinds of.
That was the first. It's an
not
epic
real.
movie that shaped. It's
not real.
and that helped formulate a car enthusiasm in an entire generation of people.
Yes.
I saw it. Gone in 60 Seconds to me, epic.
It was a great movie. Yes.
This-
there's
not-
But picture this, Rob. It goes from a show about stealing VCRs
And street
out of a
racing.
semi and street racing to we have to save the world and we have to make a car into a spaceship. So we are going to modify this Pontiac Fiero. Ludacris and Tyrese are sitting in it and they go into space in homemade spacesuits in a homemade rocket car and they dock with the International Space Station and they're able to come home on the space shuttle. That is the last Fast and Furious film.
That's literally
that's
the
the last one I
dumbest
saw.
thing I've ever heard in my
It's
life, and it just makes
ridiculous.
me validates the fact that I never saw all the other ones before.
It-
no,
It's such an
fades
amazing
into
buildup.
that. It fades into
There
that.
it is. There it is right
What?
there.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was the last movie.
That was
But isn't that no? Because there's one after that. I
That's
haven't
right.
seen.
Yeah, there's the but anyway,
This is the one that I've seen. The
that's-
last one that I saw.
That
was
is
this
the
one.
peak ridiculousness. Yes.
I was lost when I saw the Danger to Manifold scene where I'm like,
Okay.
cars don't even say that.
So
Okay, so
Come
go
on.
back to the other picture. He pulled up a nice kit car for you.
the
Yeah, that was-
Mara.
yeah, but
There's the
that's-
Mara.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
And this
a
was they
Mara?
actually sold these as a branded vehicle.
I wanted a Mara, and because I thought that's the closest
Wait,
I'll ever get.
spell
to,
that.
I thought that's the closest I'm ever going to get to actually owning
I'm trying
a
to understand the
Ferrari.
word. Mera, like a
Mera.
Oh, a Mera, not like a because there's a Mira and there's a Mirac.
Yeah.
There's just a Mera.
Mara.
Okay.
And the Ferrari sued the pants out of this
Oh, of
company.
course
They
they
wanted
would,
bankruptcy,
yeah.
but it was sold in Pontiac showrooms
Pretty amazing.
for a couple of years before they got totally just kicked in the nuts. So
Oh, sure.
Fun fact about the Fiero, which I learned today. I mean, I kind of always assumed what it meant, but it has two meanings in two different languages. And in Italian, especially, it has like a bunch of different meanings. It means very proud, fierce, bold, haughty,
Haughty?
cruel, and severe in Italian. It means
Cruel?
it means all of those
Well,
things.
I'm going to go with cruel and severe.
And then it means wild, fierce, or ferocious in Spanish.
Okay.
So I just thought that it was like cruel and severe was like,
Oh, geez.
we should probably name a car that. No, so the car itself, the Fiero, started off kind of but it was exciting. It was cheap, very fun, tossable little car. Obviously had its own enthusiast thing, still does. It went through several generations, but by the end of it, it was a V6 powered, totally redone suspension, fixed everything that was ever wrong with it. You could get it in T-tops. It was this cool little, pretty fast American little supercar.
I remember
thing.
they came in what the 2M4 and the 2M6
Right.
were the two options.
Yeah.
You get the 4 or the
and,
6.
and like I said, by the time you got to the Fiero GT, like I said, think they're pretty cool looking.
I mean, they got better. I mean, my neighbor had one, a 2M6, and he was, the problem was when I was, learning about these, my neighbor, he bragged on his so hard. He said it would do 200 miles an hour. I mean, I didn't know any different.
One of those.
But he was one of those guys that was like, it was a newer one, and it was, and I'm like, there's just no way that this thing would. And it he just talked it up so much that it was like,
Yeah.
he gave it this lofty goal that it could never get to. As a car itself, I mean, like that, it looks pretty cool. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. They just never were for me.
So, of note, if you can pull this one up too, Jake, the Pontiac 6000 was also introduced in this era which is
Jake's getting excited
Well,
about this.
It's because this is, if you look at a picture of it, it's
Wait, what is-
essentially GM's
is
K
this what
car.
I-
No, it's like a K car.
Oh, so it's like an Aries?
Yeah, it's like an Aries. Yes, it's so everybody was making one of these. This was GM's version. They had a Chevrolet like Celebrity or whatever else they had. The Citation. So they had
But
that.
they were cooler.
They were cool.
So because the Sunbird was like the cheap fun car to
Right.
buy. The 6000 was fun. Eventually that morphed into the Grand Am,
Right.
which was so much cooler in your mind than the Chevy comparison, having to buy a Malibu or
especially
whatever
with the
that was.
GTs with the body cladding and all the stuff they
Yeah.
tacked on.
So what's surprising about the 6000, which I learned during my research, is that they made a special touring package of it, which they aimed to compete at the Mercedes 190. I was like, what?
That's a
They
lofty,
would never compete.
lofty aim.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah,
So,
whoa.
yeah.
I remember these.
Yeah. See,
Yeah,
they look cool.
This
This
is
is cool.
This is the Pontiac that we were all starting. At least for me, it's like I do remember seeing these on the road.
Well, they did a lot of those little like body cladding type
Yeah.
things where they made it look sportier than it was. And they were, if I remember
They
right,
sold
for
well.
what their engines were, they were reasonably quick.
No, they were
what they
good
were.
cars.
It was being able to walk into a showroom, buy a brand new car for not a lot of money, and feel good about it, feel excited about it. Which
Well, we build excitement was, that was their
right.
logo.
But like now, it's like you're going in and buying an Altima.
Yeah.
A Camry.
Well, nobody's excited about that.
Like it's a Accord. There's no buying.
No.
Well, people buy crossovers now. They're not getting excited
Right.
about buying a
Now,
Nissan
Accords
Rogue
are
or a
getting-
Honda
they-
CR-V or any of that kind of
Accords look
stuff.
sporty.
They're
getting
it was
better.
a different time, and it's
Yeah.
one of the things I miss most about Pontiac. So this is kind of the era. So another thing you can pull up, Jake, is the transport. So 1990,
The Dustbuster
Oh, I love
van.
these.
first transport.
I love
now,
these.
my dad, we had one of these when I was a kid.
Oh.
So like a newer one, like a 93 or whatever it would have been. So this is when my dad really started to just go ham buying Pontiacs.
Yes. Look at that.
Yes. I think ours was gold.
Wow.
So
Was it all gold or gold?
Yeah,
and,
it was like
was
gold.
all
Oh, no, it might have been gold, whatever.
Because I remember these always being the two tones.
It would have been gold and tan. It was not, it was very appropriate
God,
for
just
the time.
being able to see out of these when you were inside, it was like you were in this like.
Well, the dash was as
Dome.
far away as
Oh, yeah, Jake.
like it might as well in the next county. It's insane. No, so these are times where you remember these,
Right.
And 92 they came out with the new Bonneville. And like I said, I'm still a youngster at this point, and I included some pictures that thankfully my mom dug up from family albums of this was my dad had a Sunbird at this time. That's
That
the
is
new
the
Bonneville.
family photo?
No,
That
that's
does-
not the family photo. I'm just saying that's what the Bonneville was. I have a picture of this because my Jake sent a bit. It says grandpa and something is the picture. Okay, so there's my grandpa and his Bonneville.
Aw.
That my dad
With
bought
the bow?
my dad had bought it for him and sent it to Virginia when his company started doing well as a thank you. So like my dad was finally company was getting off the ground and he wanted to buy my grandfather a car and he wanted to buy him something good. And that is how ingrained Pontiac is in my family. It was like, well, I'm going to get him a Pontiac. Like it was just always this cool thing. And the Bonneville was the nicest, biggest one. And he had that until he died.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, he kept it. It meant a lot to him.
And those were great body styles as
and they
far
were-
as the
they were-
Bonneville.
great cars.
And the Grand Am like had that similar look. It was just something.
And the Grand Prix.
It was
Yes.
an affordable car you get excited about buying, which it just doesn't
don't
really exist
happen
anymore.
No.
Yeah, and then like I said, my dad at this time, he had a Sunbird. He had a number of them, but I've got sent Jake some pictures that of when I think I had to have been 3 in these pictures. And you can just shuffle through them. But he had a Sunbird convertible, red with a white top, which would have been very sporty at the
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
In any particular order. But there's a picture. It's actually really cool to see because even though I was really young, I vividly remember being
What a
excited
cute
about.
little spinning wheel of death on the TV.
Boy, That was me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's trying.
There it is.
Yeah.
So there's
Okay.
there's little Elliot.
my best
in the-
friend
in-
had one
in
of
the front
these.
seat. There's my dad.
Joe Kelly's Oyster Shack at Town East
Oh,
Mall.
I miss
yeah.
Joe Kelly's.
How about that? Look at
God,
that.
you were
Big-
even eating bougie back
Big
then.
throat. No, we definitely were not. I think we were just going to the mall. But there's my sister hanging on it, which is not helpful.
Yeah.
There's me and my uncle, who you guys have seen in my videos, but he's a little younger there.
Yeah. I think my parents have some trip to Hawaii or whatever, and they rented a Sunbird and thought that it was so cool.
Oh yeah, my best friend had a gray one with a white top.
Yep. And like I said, I think because we gave cars a nickname at the time. We called this one Roof Car because the roof went down. We were kids.
Roof car.
I know, you can't name control you name it, but I just remember loving my dad's roof car. That does not mean like a Porsche roof car.
Yeah, not an RE.
Yeah.
This is an ROOF, or as Tyler would say, rough.
Well, So my parents got back into Pontiac in '95 with
Interesting time.
with the fourth gen Trans Ams.
Yeah. Yes. Right. So
Yeah.
those debuted in '93. That's what you guys would all call like the catfish Camaros and stuff like that. So
Yes.
that's
but
the
that was the real menacing, mean looking
yes. So that was the last body style. Yeah. Look, there's me still in the Sunfire.
one.
Yeah,
Look at that sunbird.
There's pictures there somewhere in the photo albums of her. She got a black T-top 95 Trans Am
cool.
to
Man.
take us to school. It was really
And
neat.
those were, I remember I was driving Mustang GTs then.
Of course.
And I remember being scared of those
There's
WS6s and those big V8 ones.
Yep.
They would come rolling around and I didn't want to race them because they just looked like they were going to kick your ass.
It's definitely the 90s there because we were in the front seat. Illegally.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at a picture of me in a baby seat in the front seat, my grandpa in the back seat, my uncle in the back seat, my dad driving. But
Yeah.
this was
Wow.
this is one of the few times my grandparents came because they lived in Virginia. This was like a whole thing. Anyway, point is, Pontiac's. Mike.
Point is,
Pontiac's meant a lot to me. It's like formative. It's like I was a little kid and I thought that was cool. It was just the way it was. But yeah, '93, all new Firebird. Eventually, the Sunbird got replaced with the Sunfire, which was essentially just a Cavalier.
well, that
Yeah,
kind of
but a
killed
fun,
it, though.
cool,
cool
Cavalier.
Cavalier.
It looked a lot better.
Yes.
No.
You were excited. Kids were excited to get a
Yes.
Sunfire for their first
Oh,
car.
I'm sure they
As a
were.
kid.
They were
I
cool.
mean,
They were
Like a
aggressive
Cavalier
looking.
was like,
Yeah, they were aggressive looking because they
Yeah.
still came to a point.
I
in
guess it
the
was
front.
better to Cavalier, sure.
yes.
And even my parents had a four-door Sunfire or Sunfire. When I was
Did they
younger,
make
too.
those in convertibles? They did.
Yes,
didn't
they had
Yeah.
those in convertible, and like I said, you got a cooler spoiler. This was a cooler car than the Cavalier.
I don't think I've seen one of these on the road
No,
in
they-
the better part of 15 years. Not even one.
No, they didn't really make it as far as, the fourth owner that was the kid that killed it in
Yep.
2009. Yeah.
So
I bet these would probably now, if you could find a mint one,
They're
probably
still not
command a
worth
little.
much.
No, nothing.
No.
All right, they
Don't
made
think
a
so.
GT, right?
Don't think
yeah,
so.
they did, but it's like,
Garbage.
but no, it's not garbage. It's like, first of all, good luck finding one, and then second of all, it's like they just don't command a premium because like think about it on Facebook Marketplace. Are you looking for Pontiacs?
No.
My mom wanted to relive the glory days with the Trans Am. It didn't last very long. She got a Land Cruiser. A friend of mine
big
named
change.
Blake, he still has his that he bought new in 94, 95, a red one. Still see it on occasion. And his marriage was on the rocks at the time.
that
And
goes.
he went and bought himself a new Trans Am. He's an attorney. And drove it home. Came out, showed his wife. His wife said, "Oh, it's got T-tops. I'd never ride in a car that has glass over my head."
Oh
And he
my
said,
gosh.
"Good." And that was
that was the end of-
that was
that was it.
That was it.
Wow,
That's pretty cool.
Good. You hear that, Courtney?
Does Courtney have a strong feeling about T-tops as well?
So-
Yeah, just in case she does. Now she knows.
I think she got the house, and
but did he get the?
he got the Trans Am.
That's all
He did. He got his Trans Am.
So-
I can live anywhere as long as I got my TA.
Yep.
TNA.
Things are dwindling down now. This was still, in my opinion, my heyday of Pontiac. They made the cool stuff. They came out with a bunch of stuff. The 1997, they kind of brought back a harkening back to the wide track thing with the wider is better campaign. So they start. This is what you remember.
Yep.
Of like the Grand Ams and stuff, and they would show them just how they looked very
I
wide.
just remember
Yeah.
the TV ads were everywhere with the
Well,
wide track.
and
wide
they were
track.
doing like the Grand Prix GTP with the supercharged 3800. That
Right,
was pretty
and,
good.
Yeah, they were great.
And I got another movie I'm thinking of, like I think it's Lethal Weapon 4, where it was a pretty crazy chase with a Grand Am. The Grand Am,
Well,
were
and the
cool.
Bonnevilles were supercharged
Yeah.
SSEI, right?
Yes.
Yep.
I remember those were cool.
And they still have a pretty decent following out there. Some people did hang on to those. Kind of like I'm sure Jake found out with the Park Avenue Ultra. It's the supercharged 6-cylinder GM motors respond very
Solid.
well
Well,
to
they're
mods.
bulletproof, right?
Yeah, they respond.
Transmissions can be a little
Transmissions,
but the
yeah.
engines were
The
bulletproof.
engines are great, and like I said, they respond pretty well to mods. So there's a large aftermarket community of people who still have GTPs and stuff out there that are
Yes.
pretty tuned up. They're trying to bring excitement back to the brand, even though I think they're pretty darn exciting at this point. In 2000, the Bonneville gets a redesign, but it's sharing the platform with the Oldsmobile Aurora.
That's the problem,
and
is they're
the
all badge
stuff.
engineers
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
There's nothing
They
that is
couldn't do it.
uniquely Pontiac anymore.
So yeah, like the Tempest in '61, that was like, oh yeah, they're doing their own thing. GM is now like we know it now. It was like you do not have the freedom to go make your own thing that you are not going to then share with everybody else. It was somebody central designed a car and decided it would be shared amongst these other things.
Well,
So,
and even, I mean, Cadillac maybe still had its own platform-ish.
see, that is a good looking
I
car.
love those.
Yeah.
even,
Absolutely love
even
those. And there's-
then, it was all, it was all just badge engineering, and that's where people are just like,
Now
what,
they-
what
You
does it
lose-
matter?
Yeah,
So,
it leaves a bad taste. in your
Well,
mouth.
they made a McLaren one of those, didn't they?
Yeah, Tyler had one.
Yeah, you did.
yes.
The American the ASC,
ASC,
McLaren, because
yep.
we're the American sunroof company.
Yes, and the Japanese have definitely gotten their foothold,
Yes.
and they were building the cheap cars so much better. Of course, we still see 95 Toyota Camrys everywhere to this
God,
day.
they're everywhere, yeah.
There's and
Still
90s Accords
rolling.
to a lesser degree, but they're still everywhere. And obviously, sales of Pontiac suffered a lot, and other lesser American brands building cars.
Right. So, but what they do is they try to go, hey, let's zhuzh this thing up again. So, what do they bring out? The Aztec in 2001. Now,
They
I
sure
don't really
did
need
it.
to go into this,
Easy.
but it was, I remember because like we were constantly at the Pontiac dealership, not because we had problems with them, because my dad would get a new Pontiac or a GMC every year. And as you know, our local dealership was the Buick Pontiac GMC dealership.
Yes, and they had a beautiful mid-century modern building
Yes.
on East Kellogg.
It's great.
And,
It was there a
and
lot.
the just it was a stunning building that got torn down when they did the Kellogg expansion in Wichita. It was such a shame because it was a
Yep, both of
beautiful
our parents
dealership.
are loyal customers to that
Very
that
much,
brand.
yes.
Anyway, so I remember getting a call, and it's funny, the dealer who started selling my dad cars in the 80s, like the late 80s, I guess, still there now, Mike. And he's still just like, we still can go back and be like, man, you remember when you could sell Pontiacs? And he's still like, man, those were the days. But he tried to get my dad to get one of these. And he lent us one that I can only describe as snot green. And it was like, my dad's already like, this is hideous. And it was like all these features that are so good on paper that this thing had. I mean, like I said, if you don't know what the Aztec is, there's tons of great dedicated videos to them. But, it had a removable cooler in the front. It had a tent that you could add onto the car. It was seen as this do-everything action vehicle for on-the-go youth.
Which is what people want nowadays.
Yes.
That's the thing. The problem is it was just so hideous that it became a punchline.
Right-
and
right off the
funny.
bat.
What's crazy is that now things look like this. But
Yeah.
at the time, this was way too outrageous. It was like 50% of it was plastic. It just was like, it was too wild too soon. If this had come out 15 years later, probably would have been done great. Maybe in a different platform, but the
I don't
idea
know.
is there.
Yeah, I don't know.
It just, either way, it was immediately a joke. I don't remember a
Right.
single positive.
Well, and
Thing about
forever immortalized with Breaking Bad,
Right.
and, Walter White. And they're thinking of what is a car that if somebody's just given up on life, what would he drive? Where he just doesn't care. And apparently it was a Pontiac
Pontiac
Aztec.
Aztec.
A science teacher that's just given up.
Yeah.
They became. It was a big fail, huge fail for Pontiac.
So that's not good. Like I said, sales are now lower. It's kind of always been fairly flat, but in 1989 we were like 800,000 sales. 97 we were at 616,000 sales. So eventually starts going into the fives and mid 400,000 sale units per year. So they try another thing in 2003 with the Pontiac Vibe. So this was,
Yes.
again, I remember these commercials. They showed youth like DJing and music and showing like people just having, it was like the Mitsubishi commercials at the time. It was just
Right.
people laughing and having fun around this car. It was like, oh, this is what the youth want. It is not what the youth want.
they didn't want
it was
that at all.
It was a Toyota Matrix. I mean, it was like
Yep.
America has never liked hatchbacks. And this was like, it looked like a scaled down Aztec. It was just
Flopped immediately.
it was an immediate flop. I think they kind of helped a little bit that they partnered with Toyota, because if you look at it, it is a rebadged Toyota Matrix, but the Toyota Matrix didn't do well.
Right.
So-
They were known for reliability, and it was one of those secret ones where you're buying a Toyota, at least in a used value standpoint, because Toyotas were so, in the secondary market, used so expensive.
Right.
So you get a Pontiac and get the Toyota reliability. But definitely the wrong car to borrow from the Japanese that were kicking your butts,
Well,
for
and to
sure.
use any Aztec styling cues was,
Yeah.
what
I mean,
were
this
they
was
thinking?
in the design language, but it just didn't work well once you started lifting cars up and stuff like that. But luckily for me, one of the biggest cars of my youth, in 2004, they revive the GTO name. Now, of
Right.
course, if you know anything about cars, it is not. They have GM's Australian branch, Holden, had something called the Monero. This is an '05. This is a picture my mom took. Well, I'll get don't go to the next picture yet, Jake. We'll leave that up because Tyler's gonna have too much fun with the other two.
Oh, this will be fun.
So your dad liked the GTO enough to buy it.
Right, not this one. He had a black '04. You can find that picture. That's like GTO Burnout or something is what I titled it. So my dad got a black '04. Anyway, it's a Holden Monero. Holden, they have a independent suspension V8 rear wheel drive sports coupe in Australia, and everybody's reading about how great they are to drive, and kind of the public is ushering GM bring this over here as something.
This was very important because in 2002 we lost the Trans Am.
Correct.
We lost the
Forgot to
Camaro.
mention
We
that.
lost the fourth generation. They decided not to bring it back, so there was no sports car with Pontiac anymore, which was like what?
Yeah, and Noble sports car with Chevy. And
They had the Corvette.
the Corvette, but it's not the it's a different
Corvette.
market.
So they needed something. So the Holden was there, and they should have done more with the styling.
There's me. I have this picture up in my room till it's my first burnout ever, and it was captured on one of those big Sony cameras with the floppy disk that went in it.
How about that?
Yeah.
The Mavica, yep.
So I was
Mavica?
learning how to do a burnout
Where's the
there.
Mavica?
But not a lot of people have a picture of their first burnout. It's not a good
No.
picture.
Nice.
But it is cool. So these are very important cars to me. Like, and I also included Jay because thank God my parents left my bedroom like as was. So in my bedroom, above my bed, I have a big poster of an '04 GTO. I have this pit poster as well, which was an '05 GTO, above my SLR poster. So it's like these. It's funny that you put those two cars next to each other. I'm like, I love both of these so much. But this was this came out of a magazine. It was like it says the first 4.6 seconds.
So
of the
this
rest of
is
your
still
life.
on your to this day.
I took this picture today.
That's
Wow.
so cool.
So that's why it's SLRs meet. Like, I'm not joking when I say like I drive an SLR. I'm like, this is no joke.
Were they 6 liters to start?
No. So
Okay.
in 2004, it was the 5.7 liter LS1. They didn't look that as good. They didn't have the hood scoops, and the exhaust came out one side. So they freshened it up for '05. They put the LS2 in there. They had hood scoops, and then they had dual exhaust, the true dual exhaust.
So
Did
we-
they freshen the interior at all?
We established. Sorry, after
Yeah.
this, I have a question. So
Yes.
about
Oh,
Elliot's
goodness.
bedroom.
Oh no!
Oh, yeah,
How many
right.
girls
So-
saw these?
We established
Okay.
that Elliot lost his virginity at 15 in the last podcast.
That's true. So
Yes.
that would have been.
But so you sneak these girls in your high school into your bedroom, and then were you waxing poetically about the GTO and the SLR? And
God,
that
I
was
love
what
this.
that was what just like got
Welcome to
them
the
like,
D-pad.
Sealed the deal.
I am taking this boy's virginity. He like look at this. Look at these posters. What was the?
Yeah, what was on the wall when you were losing?
I mean, this would have. I mean, this was.
it was there.
closer
It
to
saw
45. Must have been
it.
there.
Saw that.
Must have been there.
Wow.
Yeah.
How
It
about
saw
that?
those
Now
7
listen.
seconds of
Is
glory.
that stain right there?
Yeah.
That's the.
Now
yep,
listen,
that's
I
the-
I did not walk
That
these
was-
girls
Oh.
into my bedroom and go, let me tell you about the Mercedes McLaren SLR. It was just like, you can see I like cars by my decorations.
How
on
many
my wall.
Corvettes were in your room at this point?
So many, and I had Corvette.
That would've
And, no,
been the
and then
one.
where's you're going to love? I have a Corvette like comforter, and like
Oh my God. Did you? There's no way the girl went into that. There's just no chance.
It's classy. It's checkered, and the Corvette symbols are very small.
my God.
But
This is the D-pad, everybody. You're
I
getting
can't
you're getting
believe that I
insights
just
into
hit
the D-pad. Oh my Lord.
I need to take a picture of this because it's a twin bed with Corvette sheets.
Now
Were
there-
they Corvette branded condoms?
Oh no,
Oh
I
my
wish.
God. So was that was in the D-pad? So
It was
you
in
were-
the D room.
the D room.
Yeah.
Now was there any D getting thrown on that thing?
I mean,
Admit it.
yeah,
we're all
there
men
was-
here. Come on, admit
There
it.
was exploration.
Exploration.
Yeah.
What you didn't go to space. What are you talking about? What the world?
You know,
Exploration? I mean, are you talking about just like jerking off or what?
Oh, I can't. He's got to bleep that now.
Oh, he can bleep it. It's
He's
fine.
got to bleep. No,
Jake,
no,
spend a few minutes just
let's-
bleeping.
Okay.
Sorry.
no,
I,
so
I
anyway.
regret starting this.
Anyway.
It's your fault.
no. So yes, believe it or not,
Let's go back. They changed the interiors in the GTO.
I have successfully hooked up with girls with car posters on the wall and Corvette sheets on the bed.
That's
If that's
amazing.
what you're asking.
Wonderful.
Good to know. All
Okay.
right. Anyways, back to your story.
So anyway, these cars were great for me because we were going to the car dealership so often. It was like, they have a cool car and it's with the brand that we love. Because my dad was like, he didn't like the Corvettes at the time. So I was like out. He was just sticking with old Corvettes. And I was like, Dad, I really want you to get a cool, newer car. So getting that '04 was like the coolest. The picture I have from Jake, the yellow one, is I
There's
don't
the
have
bed.
the
There it
full,
is.
I don't have the
That's
full
your
There it
bed.
is.
I
Look
wish
at that.
I wish I had the adult version
Oh
of this.
my
I
God,
totally
the women!
would.
Baby.
Oh wow, they must have been just ready.
Yep. Yeah, and I've got that
Wow,
Corvette toy
DTF.
chest. Is that what
That
is?
is so DTF.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Wow.
Oh boy. Anyway,
Well, this has gone.
so the
way
picture
off
that I
the
also
rails.
included with Jake is one of the things I think for my 15th birthday or 14th,
The year that
whatever. No,
let's
yes.
see what Elliot looked like
I
when
cannot
he
thank you enough for
lost
doing this,
his-
for bringing this up.
No, I got to test drive. So my favorite thing, I was like, I
I
really
bet
want
you did.
a yellow 05 stick shift GTO because I think that's the coolest they got. And they're
Yellow,
brand
of course, yellow. Yes.
So this is actually me test driving a yellow
Oh,
05
that was the one you
stick
drove.
shift GTO. My childhood dog jumping at the side of it.
Aw.
So this was like a really cool time for me. I was like this, and it still is one of those when I have expendable income again, I want to find a really nice stock 05 GTO. I know, good luck, but they were such cool cars. Now, this picture also kind of shows you, even though it's yellow, why these didn't sell that well. It looks
Yeah.
like a Grand Am.
It's not they needed to restyle it a little bit more. They needed a bit more budget.
Right. It's a little blobby.
to change the nose on it.
Pretty much better.
Well,
I
I
think the
agree
Grand
with
Prix
that.
looks
I agree
better.
with
Yeah,
that.
that's a modded one.
Which I suppose you're right. It's a little more muscular
If I
looking.
mean, this was the
Yeah.
year like, when the GTO came out. That was the year I had like every magazine from Car Driver, Motor Trend, Road and Track, because you always got all three of those together in the mail.
Right.
And I believe, if I remember right, they were really panned. And everybody, they loved the engine, they loved the way it handled, they loved the styling got killed. Just
Styling
killed.
because the thing is, remember in 05, that's when the new Mustang came out, the actual, I forgot what S number it is. But
Yeah, the retro-
the retro
197 was it?
yeah, so that was big because styling alone, that car was going to kill it. And that's the competitor to this car. Even though I think hands down everybody agreed this drove better, rode better, and was faster.
Oh, it'd blow the doors off a Mustang.
Yeah, it was faster, but you couldn't compete with this blobby styling to the coolest retro, car that they really ever modernized.
Well, and those were the years where they were beating the Mustang pretty much regularly. 93, 94, 95, 96, 97.
Yeah,
all
that's
those years,
that's Trans Ams.
they
yeah.
were all the Camaros, the Trans Ams, all of them had way more horsepower than the Mustangs
But
did.
unlike the Trans Ams, like I said, independent rear. In 04, that's nobody else was doing that in this segment. So it was
Ahead of its time.
it was a really good car, and like I said, I was really excited about it. Unfortunately, I was not of car buying age. Oh, there you go, Tyler.
There
I
it
thought
is.
I was so
Is that
cool.
John Ross?
That's John Ross now.
There it is.
Man, early John Ross.
Come
early
on,
John
baby.
Ross.
Hop in. Let's go.
Oh yeah,
Let's go to
I
my
was like,
Corvette
chicks are
room
gonna
and
love this.
Go to my Corvette bed.
Look at those
give you
yellow
the-
gauges.
I actually
wow.
like the yellow gauges. I think that's
Like
a
I
great
said,
touch.
this was one of the I thought it was so cool, and I might have had braces at the time.
Look at
so I
that. Look at
probably
you were
wasn't
looking.
smiling.
Look at the hard. You're
Did
looking
you
hard.
lose your virginity
man.
with braces?
Yeah,
You
I
did?
think so.
Wow.
I powered through.
Powered through is
okay.
right.
I powered through the braces.
We're gonna have to. Jake's gonna have a lot of editing to do if we keep going back here. I just want you to know
I'm
this.
saying against all odds.
Well,
Well, that's
so,
yeah. There were the odds were definitely
So, but
against you.
basically, unlike Elliot, who was very successful in his conquest in high school, Pontiac swing and a miss, strike one with the Aztec, swing and a miss, strike two with the Matrix, and then strike three. I mean, this was the GTO, but there's really kind of a strike four. I
Would
wouldn't
you
say
call
it
it
because
that?
I don't think it was just too little, too late. Probably the last,
it was-
the last cool car, right?
Right. So we're not counting the G6 as the cool car. We're gonna have to go forward and back.
Right.
Because we're gonna crescendo on the G6.
I guess there's two more cool cars.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they came out with the Solstice in 2006.
Yeah.
Great car. Good looking car. And I know I picked the
Right.
yellow one again.
That's what I was saying. That's what
car.
popped ahead as another cool car, but
Yeah.
in a shape of the Saturn Sky. But things
Then
were,
they had
crap was already hitting the fan at this
Crap.
point.
So yeah, the economy is in 06 it hadn't completely gone yet, obviously, but it was heading
Right.
there. 07 not good, and I think is around the time when they introduced the G8, which is a cool car. My best friend had one, so this is a GXP model. My best friend got one in 09, I think, and whatever. And like I said, this was essentially another Holden, but instead of the Monero, this is now the Holden Commodore, I believe, is what it's called over there. So now it's a Corvette sedan. This was the CTS V for Pontiac. I mean, it was like, you got an LS motor, 4 doors. They actually legitimately said it was they was slated against the 5 Series BMW. So they were going against it for quality, drivability, and all
Well,
stuff.
and now they're big collectibles, the G8s.
Yeah.
Of all of them, the G8s is the only one that really brings the money because the Solstice is low mileage. They don't. And there's one just today. I was watching it sell at a dealer wholesale collector sale for $45,000. A G8 GXP.
What?
Wow,
Manual?
a GXP, man.
It was not a manual. It was an
Automatic $45,000 for a GXP.
for one with like 15, 20,000 miles.
All right, so
The
low mile.
GXPs are special though.
This guy, John Clay Wolf, he started this sale that is dealer only, and I was there bidding on. There's a couple Maseratis there that I would have bid like 55, 6,000. They sold for like 7,000. Maserati Spiders. There's some great deals because it's
yeah,
dealer
those are
only.
so cheap now.
Yeah, I know. Hey,
But-
trust me.
Yeah, you know.
I'm waiting to bid on these two Maseratis, and they get to the Maseratis, and this guy, so it's just so unglued different than the other auction because he's kind of a crazy personality, friends with Richard Rollins, the Gas Monkey, and he's like these Pontiac, there are these Maseratis. They are super clean. They are so nice. It was owned by a gay man, so he kept everything really clean.
Wow.
And I was just like,
All right.
this is weird.
That's great.
Where is this going?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
And then he's like, yeah, these were his babies, but he passed away. And then I was like, okay. So and then he decided to say, but he didn't die of AIDS. He died of COVID.
Oh, no.
Thank God. I was gonna say, I was like, wait, this is
Wow.
making me wonder what he passed away
Thanks for
from.
bringing that
if you
up.
let
That
it,
guy. Good
that was
Lord.
his train of thought as he was doing the
Yeah, you
auction
can't do that.
for everybody
That's
to
pretty funny.
listen to. It was just
Big face palm.
yeah, you were like,
Yeah.
you're like, ew, AIDS cars, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm back in.
Yeah, but how much? Well, that's not great, but how much are we talking here?
Anyway, it was a part of this grouping of cars. But yeah, it was a pretty interesting sale. That was the one where I was like, what? I had no idea. I
I
don't
would
get it
never have
personally.
thought 45 for an automatic, even though my own.
No.
There was one with a knocking engine here in town that was at auction. It still sold for 10 grand.
Wow.
Yeah, the GXPs. So I just remember this from my personal experience with them. My friend Jacob had a regular G8, and the regular G8 automatic only. No matter what you did, automatic only. They brought out the GXP for the final year, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll offer it manual as well." So not a lot of people optioned for it. So if you found one that had the option, it's still worth a lot of money. And I remember his brother at the time got one of those. So that was in 2010 or whatever. So yeah, Jacob had the new Camaro SS. So then the GXP had the same engine. So we were like racing them, and it was like they're just geared a little differently. And it was just an interesting, very period GM race and memory. Now to backtrack a little bit, the GTO they made in 04,
To your
05,
bedroom.
and 06. Back to my bedroom.
Well, I'm staying out of this.
No, they only sold 40,000 in all 3 years. So that's not very many.
Right.
Vividly remember begging my dad, because around that time I'm obviously driving age now, when they were liquidating them here in town. I remember them, it was brand new on the lot. They were like $16,000 or something. It was like they were written on. I was like, oh, come on. It's
Wow.
16 grand brand new. And he's like, they're going away. Well, I was like, oh my God. Obviously, if you found a cherry one, it's nothing
Well,
like that.
they're not looked upon fondly. The people associated with driving them now is not good. Like they wrecked one of the cars and coffee that Rob
Sure
runs,
did. Yeah,
so-
that guy jumped a.
But I also
jumped a curb
remember,
and
I
hit a
also
big
remember you
post.
commenting on Facebook this week asking when are these going to have their moment.
Fair.
So
But I like them. These are.
Yeah.
I do like these.
like the C4 Corvette.
When
They're
are they-
probably never going to
gonna
have
the
their
their
CR
moment.
ones are going to have their moment, and they
Sorry, Elliot.
I
No,
know. That's okay.
Speaking
Keep
of
some cheap.
CR, did
sorry.
you or?
no,
Oh.
no.
It's okay. You really want 92 and up.
It's okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So, I guess backtracking a little bit, one of the most famous and last-ditch efforts of a marketing attempt that GM did is one of the first memeable moments.
You get a car.
Yeah.
You get a car. You get a car. You get a car.
Oh,
Yes.
man.
So Pontiac phased out. Obviously, they don't have the Sunbird anymore.
Oprah.
Yes. So I
Look
got
at that.
That's the meme. Before memes, really. But in 2004, they debuted the G6, which is now their new entry-level coupe and sedan. In September 13th, 2004, as a 2005 model, they decided, well, we should give away a few on the Oprah Winfrey show. Now, originally, before the show aired, GM had agreed to donate 25 G6s. But apparently, and this is all, I did not know this went that deep, but apparently it was not Oprah, it was not any of this. Gail King, Oprah's friend.
Wait,
what
what do you mean
It's
friend?
a long-term friend.
It's always been our long.
I
So what are
want
you
to
trying
have
to
lifelong
say?
friends. Like,
I do too,
When
but-
we know each other for 50 years, people are going to think
I'm
that
gonna put
they're
air quotes
friends.
on
Oh yeah. Let's air
Okay,
quote
I should
that
have
one.
air quoted. It's a friend. Anyway, the concept got its start because of her, not Oprah, and not GM. So she was apparently, rubbing elbows with a Pontiac executive during a show taping. Like he just happened to be there, and she got them to be like, "What if you guys donate some cars?" Things escalated, and it went from 25 cars to, what if we went crazy and gave everyone in the audience a car? Now, I haven't watched the episode in its entirety. I remember it. I remember the memes. I remember all of the stuff. But originally in the episode, she has like 11 people who needed or had some story, and she surprised them with a GS6. Obviously, everybody kind of knew this was happening. The real surprise was when she said, "Everyone look under your seats. You'll find the keys to a brand new G6." And that's when she was, "Yeah, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car."
Iconic moment.
There was an article a few years ago of like someone that still had it
Now,
20 years later.
Really?
That's impressive. So yeah, here are all the winners with the car, and this is also shows one of the favorite optional G6 pieces is it had a sunroof, and you could get a sunroof, a regular one, or you could get this one, which would it split into 3 different like panes and stacked itself.
Oh god,
Looked like
that
a
probably
nightmare.
broke there.
Yeah, it was just
Eee.
yeah. So I had the question is like, well, who paid for this? Like obviously GM. So they were all like sticker price, pretty much identical, everything, $28,500. But they gave away 276 of them. I didn't know it was that many. I thought it was like studio audience would be like
100.
80, 100, basically 300
My
G6s.
God. We're all
which
in on this.
Pretty crazy. And like all the marketing, all said and done, apparently it cost GM $7.7 million to do this stunt.
Wow.
Now,
Well, everybody still remembers it to this day. So
of course,
So it worked.
yeah. But you got so they did this. They gave the contestants. I had to write it down because I was like, well, if you get a car like that as a gift, GM also covered the state sales tax, so they hooked everybody up with an $1,800 cash thing on top just to cover the thing. But because of the way the IRS treats things like this, each recipient then got a 1099 for $28,500, and they couldn't. Sometimes it was unexpected because I don't think they told necessarily everybody, or they might have figured people knew that would happen. But what happens when you get a sizable gift is you get a 1099, and next thing you know, they want the state income tax, and they want like $6,000 to $7,000 from you. Now, the thing that was also unbeknownst to everybody at the time was all of the audience was screened as having someone to be in need of transportation. So either these were all people who had a car breakdown, didn't have a car, or whatever. You can imagine these are people that cannot afford a sudden $6,000 to $7,000 bill. So a lot of these people had to sell it. So it's like, it was a very nice gesture. We all remember it, but it's like some of these giveaways go, they don't necessarily.
Well, even wholesale, they're trading it in, say they got 15 grand and they still owe the taxes. So they still were able to get a decent windfall and a decent car out of it or whatever.
Yeah. So the good news is the impact on Pontiac sales was great. It generated a massive buzz. This was on every news thing. According to my research, it had over 500 media stories in 48 hours, which at the time, this is early mobile internet, but not, nobody had smartphones. So that was pretty viral for a story. I mean, because like I said, other networks were
All over
carrying
TV.
it. And like I said, it takes a lot for another network to advertise another network show. That's how big this story was. But it didn't move. It vaulted Oprah's ratings because everyone wanted to watch and go to an Oprah show because
Oh, man, I
all the
can
stuff you
imagine.
could possibly
So
get.
yeah, Oprah's favorite things. That's what it was, where she was endorsing stuff. So
Yeah. And in 2004, and this aired late 2004, September, they still moved a total of 474,000 vehicles, which is pretty much flat of what they did.
sounds
normally.
like a lot compared to nowadays.
Right.
But yeah,
And by 2009, which is the area where we left off at with the G8s and the all that, their sales were at 178,000.
Oh.
Really bleeding.
real bad.
yeah, because Oldsmobile died in 2004.
Yep.
So around when Oprah's giving away all these cars, so that would have helped because obviously the Oldsmobile buyers, two were left, would have
Yeah, they
gone to
canceled
Pontiac,
that.
right?
Yeah, that's
exactly.
right. They're gone.
They canceled.
Yeah.
Ultimately in 04 as well. Yeah. So this kind of leads us to the unfortunate end. So
Yeah.
by 2007 and definitely 2008, everybody's hurting. The recession is fully set in. No one's doing well. GM as a whole is struggling.
Bankruptcy.
Bankrupt completely. So they go to the government and they say, we're considering eliminating brands, all while seeking, and you can just leave that up, Jake, while seeking a $25 billion loan, right? So obviously the government's like, yeah, you're going to need to eliminate some brands.
Trim some stuff.
By February of 2009, GM proposed the sale of the sale or elimination of Saturn, which I think it just got eliminated, the sale of Hummer, and the sale of Saab. So I think they sold the Hummer to the Chinese. And I don't know who bought Saab, but they didn't do anything with it, obviously.
Right.
Unfortunately, GM kind of teased like they were going to kind of keep some niche brand around for some sporty, youthful stuff. But by April, they just said, you know what, we're just going to eliminate Pontiac and just keep GMC, Chevy, Cadillac, and Buick. And they pretty much only kept Buick because at this time, China was single-handedly keeping Buick afloat. Like the Chinese, for some reason, it almost could be its own video, love Buicks. GM produces some over there, like China only models it. Like, so it was weird.
Not so much anymore, but back then.
But
it was,
at the time, it was like domestically, it made way more sense to keep Pontiac. But globally, they looked at who was moving numbers. Now, interestingly, a guy in 2009 named Jim Waldron, who was a Pontiac dealer, announced that he wanted to buy the brand. He'd secured capital for it and was even interested in buying factories, like so he could keep making them. Like this was like, I'm going to really make it. And I remember Roger Penske was going to do something with it too. But GM, they didn't even entertain it. They just said Pontiac is not for sale. They just blocked. They just were
Which
like,
in a bankruptcy, they should be selling anything of value.
insane.
So, yeah,
It's insane.
Yeah.
Crazy.
The interesting thing is, like I said, GM still owns the rights to Pontiac to this day. They didn't sell them. Like they could sell the name. They could do anything. Obviously, they don't need to anymore. But it's just a very weird thing to outright refuse a sale when they're absolutely hurting for money.
It wasn't as devastating for Pontiac dealers because they still had GMC and they still had Buick.
Yes.
Usually they were all Pontiac, Buick, GMC, or Oldsmobile as well at the time. But like the Saturn were dedicated Saturn stores, so those dealers got completely just annihilated. And our one in town, you know, they closed it for years until it became a Hyundai dealer.
Right.
They totally different ownership. I guess same people that own GMC, but
And this is a photo of the last ever Pontiac
That's
built, a 2010 white G6 sedan.
Wow.
So it's fun.
random.
They really went out with a real rental car spec thing. I mean, it's just such a bummer because they had such an impact on my childhood. Like I said, we just had Pontiac after Pontiac after Pontiac, and spending so much time around them. And then right when I was getting to be driving age, seeing this brief sprinkle of a resurgence of them making some of the coolest cars that GM made, I was like, oh my, it's happening. My favorite brand is making something. And then just to watch it die.
it seemed crazy at the time, but now it kind of makes sense.
It does.
I think with the way the buying public is now, where they don't really care as much about excitement. They really don't. There's the car enthusiasts. We're still around and we're still enthusiastic about it, but we would never consider a Pontiac as far as a cheap, affordable car anymore.
No.
So they made the right call. I feel like, you know, the Chevys, the Blazer EVs and things, and all this stuff that they're doing now. It makes sense.
And like I said, I didn't mention it because it's not really an enthusiast car. They did attempt to enter the kind of crossover market with the Pontiac Torrent. But it's a Chevy Equinox.
It's all badge engineering.
It was so badge engineered that whatever. I mean, I even think people were joking and calling them the for rent because they were just like, these are destined to be in a rental fleet. Like
that was their
just,
life.
You know, it's just a shame because it was a great brand. It was its own unique brand. They pioneered the muscle car. And they made a lot of cool stuff over the years. And it was such a sad ending to watch them fizzle out to being,
well, especially tied into your personal life.
Yeah.
I mean, in your family.
Exactly. So
and your virginity. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say that, but okay.
It was the day after that first burnout. You just had so much confidence that you're just like, it was just oozing out of your
was
braced
literally
mouth.
oozing out of it.
Maybe someone suddenly said racist mouth.
Wow. Jeez.
That's what I thought you said. I was
Brace-
like, whoa.
your braces.
That's what I thought you said. I was
Anyway,
like,
what a way to end it.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
thank you all so much for listening about the history of Pontiac and the very sad kind of thud of an ending. Not in your delivery, but just the facts. So, if you liked it, be sure to subscribe here to the Hoovy podcast, whatever the heck it's going to be called. And so that way you don't miss next week, which Rob, what are we talking about next week?
We're going to be talking about basically the cars that came back and alienated their fan bases.
Oh,
which
so
is
many.
going to be a lot of conversation.
So many.
There are a lot, and they're going to be ones that I picked personally my opinion. So some of them are going to be ones you're going to agree with.
So
some of them
Rob's hot takes, but yeah, the new Supra needs to be in there with the
the
BMW.
new Supra's definitely going to be in there, and heck, there might be one or two from here that are going to be in there.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching, listening. Be sure we're on different platforms if you listen in the car or whatever, and we'll catch you next week.